Okay. Now I'm for real back. Okay, you can hear me and the sound is good?
Hello, welcome to the premiere
Hello.
episode. Oh, I'm so excited, but also so nervous. And my nervousness manifests in two ways. One is I'm very sweaty. So I'm thankful that like I need to wear dark clothes for behind the light board because you also can't see the sweat. And then the other way is it makes me physically shake a little bit when I'm nervous. Which
I
has
feel
me
that too.
wondering, yeah. Does that happen to you? It has me wondering, why on earth did we evolve as beings to shake when we're nervous? How would that have possibly saved people?
That I don't know, but there's this book called something about fear. I don't know if the book is called Fear or it's like listen to your fear or use your fear. And I forget who wrote it. This is a book somebody told me about like maybe 15 years ago. But it's all about like how you should really tune into your body, and like when your body's telling you that there's something wrong, just listen to yourself and like get out or. So it's probably a good thing. I don't know why.
So that's all for today, everybody. Goodbye.
Listen to your fear.
So, I have some friends here in the chat. Nick, the first one, good to see you again. Nick, the first one, I'm sure this is unrelated to Nick's name, but they were my very first follower on the Whitney Lee, Wiggity Whitney stream Twitch channel before I ever had a video. Actually, weeks before I had a video. So thank you, Nick. And Bonnie's here. She is one of my very best friends on the planet. And later we're going to play an animation when I run to the other room, and that was done by Bonnie.
Awesome.
So thanks for coming. And Popsy Got, hi, Popsy Gotston. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. So this is Cora. She's my teammate and a certified amazing person. Actually, don't know where you get that certification. So what would you do?
I feel like I give it out a
qualify.
lot. I don't know.
And that's how you get it.
Right? I feel very qualified to give it to you and to others. I don't know that I deserve it,
but so I've been doing. This is my first time in a host position, and if you would have told me a year ago today that I'd be in a position where I'm just talking off the cuff without something scripted. Like I've always been kind of attracted to performance, but it's been like musical or like something where I have a play or something where I can memorize and know exactly what's going to happen before I do it. And so if you would have ever told me that I was going to be in this position of hosting and just kind of going with the flow and that I would be interesting enough or have enough to say, I wouldn't have believed you. So I'm so happy for this moment, and I'm so happy you're here, Cora. But so because I'm trying to prepare the best I can for this unpreparable thing, I've been doing practice streams in my Wiggity Whitney Twitch channel, and with those practice streams, I've asking guests who know a lot more than me how they do things. So I'm having so many good friends say hi. And so Michael Cote came on and he said for his podcast, he does a cold start. So he likes to ask his guest a question out of the blue. I think maybe it's officially not a cold start since I just explained that. But here's the question that
is this where I start sweating? What are you gonna ask me?
So this is so one thing I know about you, Cora, is that you grew up in Bolivia. So you told me that one fact once, but nothing more. So I'm curious, at what age did you move to the States, and what was something you had to get used to culturally that was different?
Yeah. So I officially moved to the States when I was 18. I came for college. And I think there was a lot I had to get used to, but I had spent summers in the States before. My grandparents, I had one set of grandparents who lived in Queens, New York. And so our year-end vacation was usually spend the summer with my grandparents. And so we'd been sent to camps and things like that. But I do remember the last 2 summers of high school, I was actually sent to like summer schools in the States. And I think it was between my sophomore and junior year of high school that for the first week of this program, I literally missed dinner every night, because for me, dinner was like, I don't know, 7 or 8, you start thinking about dinner. And so I would head to the dining hall and it would be closed. Like dinner was like at 6 or something. I don't know. And so it took me like a week to get used to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But generally, it's my understanding that cultures that with a really late dinner like that have like a long break in the afternoon too, right?
Yeah, you'll find that like a lot of stores or schedulers, they open in the morning and then they're closed for like 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. People go home, they have lunch, they take the famous nap. I don't know how many people actually do that, but they do. My parents didn't do that. My parents worked sort of like morning to evening, but like I know that my aunt, for example, would go home my cousin would leave school and go home to her and have lunch with her mom every day. So it does. It happens. Yeah.
I love that. One thing I really enjoy about being in tech that I didn't experience in my life previous to tech is that my coworkers and my community is now global. When at other parts of my jobs, when I was doing wedding photography, that was a very local experience. And so I appreciate getting to know people from around the world. So if you're from somewhere else that's not the United States, please say so in chat. I know some of you definitely are. And then we have some encouragement. We have Dan Vega saying that learning in public is a powerful thing. And Thindle says Whitney uses Lightning. It is super conductive. I like Enlightning. Of course, I like the idea of being enlightened, but I also was thinking of a lightning talk being like a explainer, like a 101 kind of explainer thing, but also the light board. So it seems there's a lot of reasons I chose the name for the show. And then you mean glowing. And then Nick is asking if I'm streaming to YouTube as well today. And that answer is yes. I'm streaming actually to the Wiggity Whitney channel, to the VMware Tanzu Twitch channel, and also to YouTube. And I don't know if I'll keep doing it that way, but I'm learning. I'm experimenting and learning about where the best place to stream to is.
So cool. Nick, first one, born in Greece. Not by any. I have no Greek descent and ancestry, but my name is actually of Greek, or it's a Greek name. Cora is a Greek name.
Nice.
Chosen out of a book, but it's Greek.
It feels very goddessy. I'll give you that. You have a goddess vibe to you, especially now with your glowing complexion. Bindle says, born in Sweden, living in Sweden. Boring.
Wow, that's cool.
It is cool. It's funny. Yeah, I was born in Ohio and raised in Ohio, and then moved to Texas, so I feel equally kind of one note. But I hope to make up for that this year. I had my son when I was very young, when I was 20, and that kind of limited my access to global travel. And so I'm hoping to make up for that. Yeah,
You're in the right
it's
job
a
for that.
right. I've gotten to reinvent myself after sending him off to college. He's a college graduate now, and he works at Adobe as a front end engineer. He's one of the he and my brother got me interested in tech. They told me that I would be into it. So, and they were right. And
That's awesome.
yeah. So one thing, okay. My story is that I'm brand new to tech. I wrote my first line of code in January 2019. I did a full stack web development camp that start to finish from ramp up to career week was a 10-month excursion, and then got my first coding job immediately thereafter, but it was as a cloud developer, which uses none of the skills that I just got during web development. And I think I forget a lot of like actual JavaScript things that I learned. I remember a lot of life lessons about how to work hard and have a growth mindset, but I don't have a lot of concrete Java skills still rattling around in there, I don't think.
But do you think that the fact that you kind of came, because we talk a lot about the developer experience, so do you think that even though you didn't spend a lot of time there, or whatever, that it's still useful to relate?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and even in our journey to create apps for our portfolio, that was part of what we were doing. Those had to get deployed, and somehow I was even then the one attracted to that step, and I can't put my finger on why. So I was writing Dockerfiles back then, so it's something we'll talk about today. So I haven't touched them too much between then and now, but and
Don't
then
touch
trying
them.
Spoiler alert. Cloud Native Buildpacks are gonna win.
Place your bets now.
So, Cora, what's your story, and how did you get into tech and cloud technology specifically?
I think, I graduated college at a time, not to date myself that precisely, but like right before, like a year before the crash, the crash of 20 years ago. So I had actually, I majored in chemistry in college, but I kind of realized sort of halfway through that I didn't really relate to the people who were like really gung ho about it. I didn't like spending time in the lab. I think I just prefer to kind of like be in my head and look at a screen than to be like measuring liquids, which I never do precisely. And I'm never prepared enough to like properly carry out an experiment. So, so I started taking a couple of computer science classes in my junior year of college. So by the time I graduated, I didn't get the degree, but like by the time I graduated, I was hanging out with some of the engineers, and I was kind of applying for the same jobs that they were applying for coming out of college. And at that time, probably, I imagine maybe it's like that today, because it seems like the job market's pretty good. But at that time, computer and consulting companies were kind of hiring. It didn't matter what you had studied. I mean, I guess maybe it's still the same. But so I ended up at a software company, and it was kind of strange because like they had hired 60 kids all at the same time without assigning us any job. And we went into like this 3-week training on like what their software did. And I was kind of lost, like it was hard to, it was just like the first time learning software. And by the end of that, it's hard. And by the end, they were like, okay, so what, make a list of like 3 jobs you would want to have. And I chose to do technical support first, because I figured before I would have, before doing anything like pre-sales or consulting, I felt that I wanted to like have time to like really learn. So I asked for tech support. And so that ended up being my first tech job. And then, I've had different roles throughout the years, sort of like switching things for different reasons, motivating a change at a particular moment in time. But from there, I ended up doing consulting. I ended up doing pre-sales. I've done a little bit of like training, but always software companies. So that company, then the economy crashed, and that was a data mining company. So I learned a little bit about like databases and schemas and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then when the economy at some point it caught up to me, and I got laid off in 2001, and then and there was like no jobs to apply for. It was so it took me like 6 months to find the next one. And then But by the time the next one came around, I found a company that like I don't know why I really wanted to work there. And it was a company that basically made integration software. And so for me, what that meant is like here they are sitting in, they're like a piece of software that sits between other things. So they would integrate like
Yeah.
whatever you're doing between like maybe like Bloomberg software or SAP
Uh-huh.
or whatever, like 30 different things. And I thought
Uh-huh.
I didn't learn anything about Bloomberg or SAP or anything, but I thought if I'm sitting in the middle of all of that, then maybe I'll learn a little bit about all of that. And so that's how I ended up in integration software. And then that's eventually what led me to cloud, because that company was purchased eventually by Sun Microsystems. And again, we were kind of like in the integration software space. And that, I feel like that's just a natural progression to what these platforms are, of like, deploying something that connects to other things. So yeah, it was kind of I feel like a natural progression.
One thing I love about your story is when you talk about choosing your next role, you're saying like, I thought I could learn the most in this position, or I would touch the most technologies in this position. So I love that you're running toward not the easy thing, but the thing that you feel like will get you the most knowledge and skills. I think that's admirable.
Yeah, it's a lot of FOMO, life by FOMO. Can't pick, I want it all. It's funny because like I have a friend who asked me like maybe 3 years ago, I had this conversation, and he said, do you think that it's better to be a specialist in one thing or a jack of all trades?
Mm-hmm.
And I think because because of my FOMO, I tend to be a little bit more of a jack of all trades, and he is
Uh-huh.
very much a specialist. So
Uh-huh.
I answered him. I was like, well, kind of like defensively, like, I think, it's good to know a little bit of everything. But then I thought about what he'd said. And I remember I ran into him months later and I was like, maybe you're right. Like maybe it's better just to know one thing really well and be good at one thing.
No,
I mean, there's an in-between, right?
yeah, first I would love to hear from Chad on that. Like, what do y'all think? If it's better to be a specialist or a jack of all trades? And then I don't think it's an either or question. I think there are places for both people. Nate was one of the people I did a practice run with. This is Nate's in the chat right now. Hi. And he talked about being an architect, and part of being an architect is knowing your tools, like knowing a little bit about a lot of tools. And so in that case, it's good to be a jack of all trades. I'm definitely with this show doing a lot of 101 shows about a lot of different concepts, like on my way to jack of all trades. But but there's definitely a place for deep knowledge too, 100%.
Yeah.
It takes all kinds. Yes. So we have a lot of, I want to catch up on chat a little bit. There's a lot of great stuff happening. We have Nate also started as a chem major, Cora. I'm not sure if you knew.
Oh, really? I
Had
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then it seems like the chat is moving, the VMware Tanzu channels popping, where the chat's popping off. So people who are in the other streaming locations, that's what the cool kids say. Go to VMware Tanzu channel. Layla's here. Hi, Layla. Good to see
Layla.
you. Armando's sharing. Hi, girls. My first line of code when I was 25 years old with the VBA office. I'm 39. Actually, I learned about Azure, Kubernetes, and this stuff. Cool.
Nice.
What's the VBA office? There's so many acronyms, and yeah. And then Findle and Nate are having a one-off about Nordic people in Minnesota. So there seems to be a connection there, which is fun. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. T is the developer shape you want to be in. Dr. Vim, can you explain that? I'm not sure I understand what that means.
I think it's like the question of like jack of all trades versus specialist. So you want to know a little bit about a lot of things, but go deep on something.
Oh, that makes sense.
So the answer is both.
Okay.
So that goes well with my FOMO also. Like I want to be both. Do it all. But pick where your T is, I guess.
You need a hump on your skill set. I like these visual shapes that we're talking about, but you need a base level that's not 0. That absolutely makes sense. Know all the tools that are out there and know a few very well. Know what's available to you, but then maybe don't dive deep until you need to actually implement something. That seems
and
to
I
make
do think, like, even though you're saying you're driving towards jack of all trades by doing this like channel and like the things you're doing now, I do think that those, like, you are learning a lot of things, but it is within the context of one area, and I think that becomes the basis on which like that hump starts to form, or that T starts to form.
My hump, my hump, my hump. The first one says the full saying is jack of all trades is a master of none, but still better than a master of one.
Really? Is that
I
the
did
official
not
for
know that.
wow.
Yeah.
That's different than jack of all trades, master of none.
VBA is Visual Basic for applications. It's a virus language of Office. Okay, this has been wonderful. Okay, we're all caught up in chats, and I loved learning about your experience. I think maybe is it Lightboard time? Let's get in there and learn.
Yeah, let's do it.
Those of you who are new, the Lightboard is behind me. So if you can look behind the piano through that door, that's actually a room to a bathroom, but here, I'll show you other way. The door that's there is permanently closed because I had to put a black curtain in front of it. You'll see. But we're gonna do a sport right now, which is I'm going to play Bonnie's animation, which lasts 35 seconds. And during that 35 seconds, I'm going to sprint into the room and try to get set up on my Lightboard before it comes. Cora, you and I are still
all right, we're rooting for you. You can do this, Whitney. You got plenty of time.
And I'll work this out better in future episodes.
Like, ready, set, go. Should we do that?
Yeah, you can see me like crouching. Okay,
I'll get you started. Okay, ready, set, go.
So I'm sprinting through the bathroom into the Lightboard room. I have to plug in. Yeah, because the actual door is cut off. So now I'm plugging in a stream to a monitor that I can see, as well as the live stream. And then I'm also plugging in.
Bonnie believes in you.
Power. Thank you, Bonnie. Now I'm going to try to turn on the monitor in time. Woo! I practiced this literally 5 times earlier this morning. We did it!
Did you make it?
We did it! Oh, dang, I forgot to change the camera. But now you can see, this is actually pretty interesting. This is behind the scenes version of, dang it, man, I was excited. I thought I had it.
That was perfect.
All right, we got a lot of comments. Okay, here I am. Ba-ba-da-da. Not too far off. We'll do another with the other 10 seconds. Cool. Hello from behind the Lightboard. I'm so happy to be here right now. Pinch me. I cannot believe this is my life. So I'm gonna we have a lot of, actually I can do everything from here. Let's turn over the names.
Yeah, I remember, please. But I forgot how to do that.
We got it's Wiggity time, and and praise for VBA too. Popsigot says, let's go into the dark room. Purple Regret says, get a Wiggity. It's like an Olympic sport. And don't fall. I'm wearing socks here. I'm going to show you. I've been, for my next promo, I've been working on a risky business move. This is, so watch. Here we go. I'm just going to show you. I opened the closet so I get a running start.
So wait, I forgot how to do what you said.
Oh, it's okay. I got it.
I'm supposed to be helpful, but I forgot how to.
So I've been working on my sock slide on the wood floor to get in here.
Oh, nice. Like Jane Fonda.
Nick says he prefers in practice where I ran with the camera and you just saw everything that I was going through. Maybe we'll do that every once in a while just to keep it exciting. Cool. Okay, so I think let's do this. Oh, Nick is giving you encouragement. You're helpful, Cora. Don't worry.
Oh, thanks. I just don't know how to take the name off the screen anymore.
It's okay. We got it.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Okay. So let's get on this. Let's hear from the chat really quickly. Like, what's your frame of reference? Do you all generally have experience with Dockerfiles? Do you have experience with Cloud Native Buildpacks? Well, as we talked about, I know I've touched Dockerfiles before and in my coding boot camp. I remember working with like deploying an Nginx web server, but having no concept of what I was doing at all. Just like following a tutorial that was going to make my container run somewhere where I could access it.
I love
Spindles.
Yeah.
Wait, will you share that
I got
comment,
that.
Cora?
Yeah, I love Dockerfiles as long as someone else writes them and as long as someone else maintains them. Oh, this is
And
cool. So yeah, Raymond says, looking to move to Buildpacks at your company. That's exciting.
that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone says, cool thing you're not serious at all the time. Smiling counts a lot. Yeah, honestly, I think I couldn't be serious all the time if I tried. And I'm nervous enough knowing that I can still be my full genuine self. If I felt like I had to pretend to be someone I'm not sure I could do it. We have Nick, the first one, saying, I worked with Docker on personal projects, but now we're doing everything manually or with Azure DevOps. Do you know how your images are built within Azure DevOps? And we have another comment, build packs are cool, but will take a while to dominate. We're here to assist in that.
We're here to help.
Yes,
I mean,
that hero
Dockerfiles
arc.
takes a while also.
Oh yeah. What do you mean by takes a while?
To master it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I think the 101 of like, oh, I can copy this Docker file from the internet and use it is pretty easy. But if you want to, like Docker files, you're in the game for a long time, writing and maintaining and perfecting and reevaluating and yeah, it might be deceptively hard to master.
Yeah, rebasing, yeah. All right. So one thing I'm really excited about with this show, because I'm so new to tech, I'm learning a lot of like the cutting edge technologies, but I'm not really having maybe as much understanding as I would like around what problem is being solved. So can you tell me about the world before containers existed and how they came to be?
Yeah. So I guess if we could summarize it in one phrase, we would say that the world before containers is it works on my machine.
It works. Yeah. Okay. I hear that a lot.
Because at the end of the day, like, you would have you would write your application and then your code has to be packaged in a way and delivered to a machine in production where it's going to run. And so if you are only giving your code to the team responsible for launching that in production, what about all the other things that your code needs? And as you do that for your development environment and then your test environment and your production environment, how easy it is for the teams that own those environments to really make sure that they're all the same. Because even if you think about it, like you probably have a bigger budget for your production environment, right? And the detail about like, think about like when you install the operating system on your, say you have 2 laptops at home, right? There's no way that it's very hard to make sure that they're the same. You create a file on one and in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I should have that on the other machine too. But it's hard to maintain that. There's very easy to have divergence. So that's kind of like that's the world before, where it takes a lot of coordination and documentation and handoffs and checks, and it's a manual process and it relies on people. And if you're improving on processes because you automated it yourself.
Okay. Is that more of the throw it over the wall thing too? I've heard throw it over the wall to production, and then like I wrote the code, I'll make it their problem to actually get it to run with all the dependencies and stuff that it needs.
I think you can still have a little bit of throw it over the wall even with a container, because if you run the production, let's say cluster, right, and I still throw you my container and I walk away, There's still like, I think the throw it over the wall has two aspects. One is, like, how can I give you all of my environment in a box so that I'm throwing less stuff over the wall for you to figure out, like, where does it have to land? And then the other one is this sense of ownership. So we used to talk a lot about like project management, and then there was a vocabulary shift towards product management, with the idea that a developer team should feel and should have ownership over this product throughout its life. So it's not the responsibility of the developer didn't end when they delivered the application to the ops team to stand up in production, but rather like until that application is retired and replaced with something else or whatever, the developer team is on the hook and invested in its success in production. So there's a little that I think that's also part of the throw it over the wall.
Yeah. That's maintenance seems like a big thing here.
Yeah.
Not just building it the first time, but the maintenance
and troubleshooting probably, and like just having that sense of ownership. Yeah.
So we have wouldn't you say VMware was the time before times to containers? VMware, like VMs, virtual machines are probably in between the before times you're talking about and containers.
Well, I think, well, with VMware, with virtualization of hardware and having virtual machines, was still what I would put in the category of it works on my machine, because a virtual machine gives you basically a machine with an operating system on it. But if you want to deploy an application, you might need to install extra packages on that operating system that are different for different programming languages, a different kind of application server, all of the rest of the configurations, how you might connect to databases or other things, like all of that is different.
And then my understanding is there's like tools like Puppet and Chef. That's what they do, is help keep the VM in a certain state, or to have certain dependencies or manage that part of VMs.
I think they're more for like creating environments that you're going to deploy to.
Okay.
So standing up provisioning those virtual machines, and then putting the necessary stuff on them. But it still doesn't necessarily account for all of the little variations that you're going to have. If I'm a developer and I change a version of a library, of a Java library that I'm working with, then and I mean, there's other things that helped the situation of it works on my machine. There was a time like before, dependency management things, right? Like, I mean, now we use Maven and Gradle. Preceding that was something called Ant. And if you go back in time enough, like people were doing that kind of thing manually. And like, if you're in the Spring Boot world, then Cote says, Cora got a desk. Workout camp. This is true. This is my first stream. I went to IKEA this weekend, and actually, I went to IKEA, and like there's no stock anywhere. So I bought like a table, and then I found a chair that I liked, but I had to get that on Facebook Marketplace because IKEA didn't have anything anywhere. It's like a showroom. You get to the warehouse and there's nothing there. So I have a desk. Thanks for noticing, Cote. So even with virtualized machines, is that what I was saying? There's still a chance that like what works on one machine doesn't work on the next. And that's the container. The container is the entire environment, right? So you're putting from the operating system, your packages, your runtime, everything is in there. So that can basically land in a vanilla environment. And so that's really where you take control and say, here's everything that you need. And I'm following this standard that will work for whatever application.
And a container is more lightweight than a VM. A VM needs an entire full operating system, when a container needs just enough to run the application.
And you can have multiple containers on a virtual machine. So they're also a little bit more efficient in terms of,
so they work together. They're not mutually exclusive.
Exactly. Yeah. At least, I guess, I think we are moving towards containers running outside of VMs, but at least within the world that we're operating today, broadly, you'll find containers running in VMs for the most part.
I've been so new for so long that it just now occurred to me that someday someone might ask me what were things like when containers still had to run on VMs.
Yeah.
Someday, someday I'll be someone else's
You're
Cora.
like,
Yeah.
why did you have this layer in between?
Yeah. We have some, let's catch up on chat. Bindle says you can say it works in the staging environment instead of saying it works on my machine. Haha. Or that's what Nick said. Sorry to Bindle. What if it doesn't even work on your machine though?
Don't admit it. Don't admit it. Always, it works on my machine.
No one can know that. It's your machine. Yeah, they only have your word. So we got, last thing I made it was connect to Google Maps API. I guess I don't understand that, Armando. Maybe I'm not meant to understand it. So Dr. Verm says, so you could share VMware images like containers. It just wasn't as easy. Chef, Puppet, Vagrant wrapped VMs to make them repeatable. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was harder. Yeah, it was harder. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about making the easy thing, making the right thing the easy thing. I think when things are, things are possible, but they take so much effort because you have to fill this gap between like what is the technology makes in like natively possible and what you really want. So if that's too much work, then it just, there's just chance for failure there. And then if you want to do that at scale, or if you want like, everyone in the world to be doing that, those things are going to fail. And that's where, what's the expression? Necessity is the mother of invention. So that's, it's because of those gaps that we redo it better.
Yeah. So we've come full circle to the point that Kubernetes can run VMware images now. And with OCI, which is Open Container Initiative, I know this one. Now we're vendor neutral. So Kubernetes used to have to work with Docker, but now with OCI, they can work with any kind of container runtime. Containers might be lightweight, but Docker Desktop isn't. That's a good point. I associate Docker Desktop. Yeah, I associate Docker Desktop with making my computer really hot.
And Chrome.
And Chrome, yeah. Fuel Sneeble says that they heard Podman is supposed to be cool. I have a question for related to that. What would make a container runtime cool? Like what might you want from one container runtime? Like what opinions does a container runtime have?
Don't kill my machine, please.
And if you don't know the answer, it looks like if you don't know the answer, that's something we can figure out another day. But I'm just curious, like,
a container, like, what opinions would it?
Like, why would I want to choose Podman over Containerd, or why would I want to choose Docker still? Like, what does one container runtime offer that another one doesn't?
I think, when I was learning more about Dockerfiles, one of the ones that I explored, which was a backend for building images specifically, not a runtime, but just because Docker not only runs your images, I guess you're talking more about runtime, but like Docker, for example, from the perspective of helping build your, run your Dockerfile and produce an image, I looked at one alternative called BuildKit that one of the things that it did that the Docker daemon wasn't doing, at least not at the time, I still don't think it does, was to look at the different things, at different commands in your Dockerfile, figure out which ones could be run in parallel, and do those things in parallel. So then it was a faster build. So from a build perspective, I guess you can look for optimizations like that. From a runtime perspective, I'm not the expert on like why choose Docker runtime versus another one.
Yeah, I'm hearing Podman allows you to build Docker images, but you don't need Docker Desktop. So we're talking about using that locally, but we're going to talk about building images today. This said security is maybe one of the reasons you would choose one over another. That makes a lot of sense to me. gvisor is a user space container runtime, which makes it more resilient to escape catastrophe. Docker is built on top of BuildKit, so it's also a front end to BK.
Docker is built on top of
over my head personally, but I bet someone found it interesting.
The thing that Dr. Verm said before that, the user space container runtime, click on that, yeah. So that, so that basically, that has to do with like, if there is a, if someone like if there's some malicious activity, for example, and somebody wants to escape a container and get to the host machine, then it sounds like from what Dr. Verm is saying that gvisor would protect you a little bit more.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the escape catastrophe by keeping it within a user space.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of security, yeah.
There's a name for that type of, it escapes me right now. Breakout attack, isn't that it? How is it possible to perform some hardening in terms of security on container image if we use Buildpack over using Dockerfile process? I think, is that something we'll probably touch on?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. We promised to answer,
Yeah, Suman, I guess, bring it up again if you still have that question at the end, closer to the end.
Yeah, that sounds great. Isn't it like different flavors of operating system, like Windows, Linux, Mac operating system, something on, they basically do the same thing on first sight, but then they're different features. That's my impression too, like kind of what we're saying. One has an emphasis on being lightweight, one has an emphasis on security. One might have some capability that the others don't have, but they all generally have the same core capabilities. Dagger is the next gen front end to build kit.
I haven't tried that.
And then the Docker runs on Linux, so secure automatically. Am I right? I think that's a tongue-in-cheek statement. Jailbreak. When I was trying to remember, I still think it might be like a box. Has to do with the word box. But jailbreak sounds cool. Security, like working with security is just cool. Like when you get to say like, that's when you're like really a hacker and you try to break stuff on purpose. That sounds like a fun gig. And then like, that's when you get like all the, Angelina Jolie kind of like hacker, like 80s vibes. That's, I think security is awesome. I think those kids are so cool. Anyway, so let's get started. Let's just talk about a vanilla Docker file first in an unopinionated way. Just like, what is a Docker file and what's it anatomy of a Docker file?
So a Docker file is a script that you write. There are certain commands. So every line has to start with one of the valid Dockerfile commands, of which without going to the Dockerfile website and checking, I believe let's say there's, I don't know, 15, 20 of them. I think I'm frozen or you're frozen.
Yeah, we're back though.
I'm good? Okay.
Yeah. Dockerfile is a script.
Yeah, so it's a script.
I'm learning things already. Like I guess I could put that together, but I didn't have those words. Yeah,
so like, I mean, you can write a bash script, you can write, whatever shell you choose script. And so a Dockerfile is a script. It's not run by like the shell on your computer. You're not going to say like bash run my Dockerfile. You're going to tell Docker, the Docker daemon is going to run your Dockerfile, but it's essentially like it's going to go top to bottom and run one line at a time as it gets to it. So it's not like a language where you have methods and while loops and things like that. It's just like read one line, execute that, read the next line, execute that. And every line basically starts with a valid command. And the first command, the first meaningful command is going to be from. Meaningful, I say, because you can do things like set environment variables or arguments, or kind of like as you're improving your Dockerfile, you can maybe put a couple things before the from, but like the from is really where the meat of it is started. And so at this point, you're saying, what's my starting point? And so the simplest you could get is there's actually a base image. So the next thing here is going to be the name of a base image. A base image you have stored somewhere.
Is a base image the same as like the operating system?
A basic, I mean, a base image is just like your starting point image. Your base image could be an image with only an operating system in it. Or you could say in this from statement, you can say your starting point is you could choose a base image that already has the runtime for Java, for example. So wherever you start from, you're only going to add add the things that you need to run your app. So if you don't want to be installing, like if you're going to build your app inside of this image, you might want to start with an image that already has Maven or Gradle so that you don't have to install it. Or if you want to control, you know, how you install Maven or Gradle, then you might want to start with something that just has the operating system.
Why would you want to control that?
For what maybe you want to be specific about the version, or who knows, like, you know, yeah, but you have a choice.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So what's an example? What should we put here? Should we just put like base image generally, or should we go specific?
You can, so let's see, I can,
I remember doing Alpine. I don't
Alpine, yeah, so Alpine are like really lightweight ones.
Okay.
So yeah, you could say, yeah, so Alpine, or you could say that, you could say Alpine. Okay. Let me look at this one. Let's see exactly what I have here. Yeah, I have, well, I have two examples in front of me. Neither actually has Alpine, but.
Yeah, tell me what to put.
Oh, so let's say we were building, let's do a, you want to do a Java one? Let's do a Java one.
Sure. Yeah.
So for example, okay, so I have an example in front of me where I start with a base image that actually already has the JDK on it.
Okay. And Java Development Kit is JDK.
Java Development Kit, yeah. So those are the tools that you need in order to compile a Java application. So yeah, so let's say you could, so I happen to have one that says adopt open JDK.
And oh, I'm frozen. Here we are.
There you are.
Are you with me? I lost you for a minute. So what's the image for a development kit?
So the one I'm using in my Dockerfile is adopt open JDK. And if you want it, if that sounds too long, we can just.
I guess I didn't understand your syllables well enough. Do you want to put it in a chat?
Yeah. So adopt, like adopting a pet.
Adopt. Gotcha.
Adopt. And then just continuing as if it was one word, open. And then also just same word, just keep going, JDK, Java Development Kit. Yeah.
Cool.
And then you could put, then you would have a colon.
Oh, more.
And then you could have a version like, let's say 11 or whatever version of Java you want to use.
Right.
So, and yeah. So, but already, like this is already where you can see if you're writing a Dockerfile, like this is a decision, right? Like,
yeah,
we have to decide where we're starting from. Are we starting from a base, like, and who created this adopt open JDK image, and do we trust them? And do we just say version 11, or do we say something a little bit more specific?
Yeah.
In fact,
or yeah.
Oh, in fact, yeah, I think actually that's not even enough. Like you need 11-JDK dash and then hotspot.
What?
It's actually what I have. Yeah, because
dash. What's the last thing?
Hotspot.
Hot,
like hot like the sun, and spot. Like sunspot.
Cool.
So yeah, so there's, so then when do you upgrade version 11, and what if there's like a vulnerability in version 11? Like now this is all, Whitney, you now own this. This is your responsibility.
Right. And like, it's pretty common to like the JDK is going to upgrade like and I'm going to want to use those new features. But if I do, then that means I have to rewrite the whole thing and redeploy.
You'd have to retest it. Like you probably, I don't think that there's going to be such a big change in Java that you would have to change much about your Dockerfile, but you would want to retest your application, rebuild all your containers. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And then, what's unsaid here is, where is this image, right? And so because there's no prefix before adopt open JDK, that the default usually means that it's on Docker Hub. If it was on GCR or some other registry, you would have gcr.io, blah, blah, blah. But so here, this one is on Docker Hub, and Docker Hub has some images that they either that are certified by Docker that they have up there, or they have some that are like, I forget, there's two kinds, certified and then kind of like partner certified, or like some contributors certified, but there's some sort of, they call them Docker official images. So that's like one place you can go. Or if you work for
Mhm.
an organization, that organization is probably going to use their own internal images that they've built from
Ah,
scratch,
that makes a
where
lot of
they
sense.
literally install the
Mhm.
operating system and create that base image for you. So,
Mhm.
but generally, when you're starting with a Docker file, you're not going to install the operating system. Like you're not going to go that far back
Yeah.
into the process of creating that base to start from.
Okay. That's
And
great.
so if you were to, yeah, so I guess we'll get to it, right? But Docker files, like each one of these commands is going to create this layer, right? Like I think in a
Mhm.
previous conversation, you were comparing a Docker file to a parfait. And
Yeah.
so as we get those layers, if
Uh-huh.
you only did this and you
Mhm.
kind of like re-exported this with a different name, you could still look into this adopt open JDK, and that in itself has layers. So you're inheriting all of the layers from this base image that you're using, and then you're going to add on top of it.
All right. Let's make it perfect.
Oh,
So we just put in the JDK. It's our layer down
yeah.
here.
We'll put
Cool.
some coffee in it. Coffee flavor parfait. Or Java.
Alrighty.
Java coffee flavor parfait.
Yeah. Okay. What's next in our, oh, I hope our Docker file isn't too big. I feel like I'm not leaving enough space visually. We'll figure it out. So talk to me about what's next.
So then, so it just so happens that this particular base image that has the JDK doesn't, at least from reading my Docker file from when I wrote it, it must not have Maven, I guess, because I installed Maven writing this Docker file. So, so the next command might be like, okay, well, do I have to install anything into this operating system that's missing? So the command to start that is run, and run just allows you to execute a command inside of what is this base image, right? So
Okay.
yeah, so run is another official, like another Docker file official command. And so
Okay.
here at the end, so here you then you just have to put all of the commands that you would put if you were doing this on this, if you had logged into this operating system and were doing this manually, right? So there's
Uh-huh.
uh, kind of like better, like just sort of standard ways to do this on Linux. So for example, I don't know if you want to write
Uh-oh.
all of this up, but like there's a utility called apt-get, apt-get. So basically you want to install Maven.
Okay.
Yeah, so you want to update
Okay.
the, yeah.
So just apt-get Maven.
Well, yeah. So I have 4 lines of commands on this one. So I don't know how much of this you want to
Okay.
write, or if you want to make
So
it like
let's
a
just set,
pseudocode.
let's do, oh yeah. How's that? Just more of a
Yeah,
install
let's do
Maven.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's some, and so that when you install Maven, yeah, there's a whole bunch of best practices that you would need to consider when you do this. So like, do you need to like update some indexes on the operating system so that
Uh-huh.
everything is kind of like, yeah, just kind of up to date? And then if when you install something, are there things about it that you want to delete first? Because at the end of the day, that everything that you do in this run command is going to be like added on top of this set of layers that came from the adopt open JDK, right? So this is going to be
Uh-huh.
one layer by itself. So if this is only your build image, then it may not matter what the size of that layer is. But if this
Uh-huh.
is, and if this was going to be the image that you deploy to production, then you might
Uh-huh.
want to consider like, is there anything I want to clean up right after I install Maven? And whatever you're doing, any prep or any post cleanup before and after installing Maven, you would want to do that all in the single run command. So if you have a second command that says run cleanup, that won't help you,
Uh-huh.
because it's kind of like, if you think about, here's one good way to
Because
think
it,
about it. Yeah.
yeah, because of the layers. Like you're cleaning up that one
You're,
particular layer. If
well,
you,
you're cleaning it up, but it's also like, so imagine that you have a Git repo, right? And you do
uh-huh.
a Git push, and you pushed 5 files to your Git repo, and then you realize one of them is an image that's huge and you didn't really need to Git push that. So on your local,
Yeah.
you say delete this file, and then you push
Uh-huh.
the change of your deleted file. It's only that
Uh-huh.
top view of the latest snapshot of your Git repo that doesn't have that file. But the history of
Yeah.
your Git repository still has that. So that would be like a
Yeah.
second
So
parfait.
you,
Like,
uh-huh.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So you're not actually saving the space by
not really.
like, yeah, you're just covering it up.
You're covering it
Um,
up. Yeah.
yeah, we have some questions coming through chat. Let's take a quick break from our conversation. I'm getting so engrossed in what you're saying that I'm giving this proper attention. This is what, okay. So, oh yes, Fuel Snable, I was saying security is so cool. I do think it's cool, but Fuel Snable is dispelling that idea for me. It looks like my experience of security is the opposite end, sitting in war rooms. See, even the idea is called a war room makes it sound cool though, right? Sitting in war rooms with the DPO and CIO and CISO, I'm guessing those are titles of people talking about how to mitigate the security incident. That does sound pretty fun.
Yeah, I don't know what DPO is, but Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, CIO,
Cool.
and CISO.
Findle says their introduction to Dockerfiles was a default .NET Core deploy file, and it burns him a bit. It spun up one image, used that to build, spun up another image in a container, and then deployed the result from the first container into the second one, and then deleted the
What?
first one.
I'm so dizzy.
Is that like, does that
What
have
a
to
fun
do with
image.
the build image versus the run image?
Oh wait, no,
So
wait.
that,
That's okay.
yeah,
Wait, sorry. Let
yeah.
me let
So the
me read that
deploy,
again. Actually,
yeah.
sorry. I'm just going to read Tyndall's comment again. My introduction to Dockerfiles was the default .NET Core deploy. I think it burned me a bit. It spun up one image, used that to build. That's good. Spun up another image spun up another image in a container, and then deployed the result from the first container onto the second one, and then deleted the first one. So that sounds. I mean, it sounds like maybe a little
So,
more process, but that's
so,
by and
so
large
the
the right thing to do.
Yeah, the deployed container doesn't have
Yeah,
the build tools in it. We'll
yeah.
talk about that a little bit. Neat test technology, am I right? There's an LEG where he talks about technology. He uses M,
Oh, I love
technology.
him. Yeah,
and
talk about
I
a phone.
still Dr. Verum is telling Findle that's what multi-stage Docker files are for, to get separating
Exactly.
out the build tools. Uh, Oh, Fuel Stable talks about my reverse mirror writing, but there is a simpler explanation. It's just flipped in post. It looks like I'm left-handed, but I'm not. I'm right-handed. Um, I do like the idea of writing on a screen. Uh, isn't hotspot the Oracle jitter? I mean, I know
Hotspot
you're
is,
talking about this
yeah.
hotspot, but
Yeah, I mean, you
I don't
can
know.
choose, right? Like, but that's the point, right? Like, you're choosing what you want, and like how and who supports it also, right? Like, you threw it in your Docker file. Like, is it really supported? And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah. Um, Is there a link to the Lightboard setup? The brand name of this Lightboard is Revolution, so you can look up Revolution Lightboards. Pip install the world. Cradle versus Maiden fight. Pip install the world.
Yeah, so yeah.
Dr. Burns says, even with multi-stage, there's still a bit of an art to it if you want to reduce runtimes, especially as users update code and rebuild.
Yeah, and so we can
And
talk about that too. Yeah, that kind
yeah,
of refers to like taking your app and like in the case of Java, maybe not like using the whole jar file, but like opening that up and being careful about how you move that into your runtime image. I think that's one of those examples. Yeah.
and there's a lot of humanity in this. There are a lot of choices being made and deploying. So I think that, and like some people are going to have the art and the organization more than the other, and some people are going to end up with better images for the same code base than
Yeah.
others. Are different. Just the fact that they're different can be problematic, is my understanding. Yeah, many times you still want nice base images. I'd always want, not many times, but always want nice base images. I'm kind of a snob like that. Oh, Fuel Stable is letting me know DPO is Data Protection Officer, the person responsible to make
Oh.
sure GDPR is implemented correctly. Fuel Stable, you can't use more acronyms. I don't know. When you explain the acronyms, I don't know. Well, you can because you did. But will you please now explain to me what GDPR? GDPR. is implemented create. I can't. Data protection. I don't know. That's all right. Cool. So now we're caught up, and now we have a from image and a run image. And with the run, we need to install. Yours is 4 lines, but you need to install something and be aware of the best practices.
Yeah, I mean, like mine
And
is 4
Dr.
lines
Berm
because
says
it
there
does,
should.
right, it does like an update and then it installs and then it cleans up and then it actually removes a particular directory that's like all documentation or something. Partially because my Dockerfile was, illustrative to teach like these are things you might consider. So yeah, it was
Right on.
4 commands all in a row under this one run command.
Okay. And those commands can be implemented in a way that they're only one layer, or they can take up several layers, right?
Correct. And so, yeah, and so you want it, and so that's where that's important, where like if I had split the one that deleted the documentation directory into a second run command, I really would not have made my image smaller.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool. What's next in our parfait?
So then you have, what's common, for example, is there's a command, for example, called work dir, all one word. That's another like thing that conventionally you would put in all caps. And that basically, and then you put the name of a directory like, / workspace or / app or whatever you want, wherever you want to work in. And so what that means is that once you get to this command, it's going to create that directory if it doesn't exist, and then it's going to cd into it. So that's if you were doing it manually, that's like a make dir cd.
Okay. Is the cd command, do I have to say that, or is that just automatically happen?
That's what work dir does that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then you can start, now you're in you've got supposedly, right? You're in the directory where you want to do your work, and you should have everything that you need in the environment to build your app. So in this case, if this were, so you could, if you wanted to just be really short about it, so at this point also, when you run that Docker build command, you tell it what are the files what's the context where this Docker file is basically executing. What's the context for the Docker file to execute? So you have all of by default, generally it's your local directory, but you can point it to another directory. So your context, we can assume, has your code, right? So if you have your application stored in GitHub, you would have done a git clone, cd into your app, and then run your Dockerfile. So if you, at this point, just do like a Maven build, that should work because it's as if you were in that directory. So, so if you were, if this was like my first Dockerfile, you might just do a Maven package at this point. But that doesn't work to your advantage, because then everything about that Maven package, which means getting all of the Java dependencies, or whatever framework you're working in, all of your dependencies plus compiling your code, everything is going to happen in that one layer. So if you change like one comma in your code, you're going to have to like recreate that entire layer. So what you want to do is say, okay, well, what are the things that are most likely to change, and what are the things that are least likely to change, and try to separate things out. So one very common approach here is to say, let me deal first with the dependencies of my app. So all the stuff that's not my code. And then
that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So for example, in Java, what this would look like is, so you've got your base directories available to you, your context is available to you. So maybe just copy over just your dependencies file, which if you're working with Maven, that would be your pom.xml file. So copy is another Dockerfile command. So you would say, copy in all caps.
How many layers are in our parfait? Just so I can plan my board.
Well, so we don't know how many came from the base image, the adopt open JDK image. But yeah, I think we're going to have one per, I think it's one per command.
But like, how many are still to come?
Oh, how many more? Oh, yeah, more than will fit on the screen. We might have to kind of like condense this. Yeah, so let's get through the build one, and then I think we'll have to take a mental image, and then so you basically copy your pom.xml file, pom.xml. And then And then what you can do is to just specifically download the dependencies that are mentioned in that XML file. Only that, right? So you would do another run command.
Okay.
Yeah, like another run, and then there's a command called Maven MVN. So I use Maven dependency. Colon go dash offline. So basically this is like, these are called goals, things that Maven can do. So it can basically just say, take all of the dependencies mentioned in the POM and download them. So then you're going to have a layer in your Docker file that contains all of your dependencies. And that might be large, and that's probably not going to change as often as your code. So then, and this is the important part, after that, you actually copy from your context your code. So here you would say copy. Copy it, yeah. And so you're going to copy on your, since this is Java that we're talking about, your code would, by convention, be in a directory called src source. So you would write src /. So that's like on your local machine. And then you're going to copy it to a place called src, sort of like what you haven't, you're just replicating, right? With a space in between.
Okay. So just.
Yeah, src / space src /.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, perfect. So you're just saying,
from here locally to this place in your container. And my parfait, I'm drawing the parfait, but maybe not as accurately as I could, because I would want to give like the dependencies layer a lot of space. Like I'm not very accurate with how much space each layer is taking up in the parfait. Yes, not to scale. So
we have one more command in this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
what do you? Yeah. Okay.
So the last command in this one would be run. And then it would be again space MVN. And then we'll just keep it simple. Just say package.
Package.
Yeah. And then like the way I have it written is actually skipping tests and then -- offline, so that it makes sure to use, the offline dependencies that you downloaded earlier.
Oh, gotcha. Interesting.
So now the beauty of this is if you change the code that you're writing as a developer is all in that source directory. So if you change your own code, if this file runs again, it'll know, Docker will figure out that you didn't change the pom.xml and that you didn't change the base image, that you didn't update, as long as you don't update your Docker file to have like a different version of Java, for example, then everything will just reuse all those layers. And if you change your source code, it will do like it'll like hash or whatever is the word for it, but it'll notice that the source directory is different. And so it will discard that source directory and the one created by the run, and it will recreate only those two. Yeah.
So this is one complete Docker file. You said
yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna complete the parfait, and then one thing I want to say, I just want to kind of repeat to you what I think is happening to synopsis. So we're getting our JDK, our Java environment. So that includes the underlying open source, the operating system, sorry, wrong OS. That includes the underlying operating system. And then we're going to install Maven on top of that, which is a flavor of working with Java. And then there are lots of best practices to consider when you're doing that. And that also takes several commands that you want to combine in the right ways so that it doesn't make a lot of different layers. Then you make a working directory, that's your workspace, and then you're going to copy first into your container the dependencies with the pom.xml file. And you want that to be separate from your code because that's probably going to change less often than your code. Then you're going to run Maven dependency, and that's going to offline. So it's going to pull the dependencies. When you say offline, oh, because it's going to get them from the pom.xml file.
It's going to read the pom.xml, go to the internet, download the files, and put them in. Like by default, when you're working with Maven, all those files go into the local users .m2 directory. So it's just going to take them and put them in the image. So imagine, for example, yeah, I'll let you finish yours, and then I'll ask something.
Okay. And then we're going to copy from source on our local machine and put it in source in our image that we're creating. And then we're going to run the Maven package offline to actually get the code packaged up with everything we've put in together with the code. To run the code.
So like imagine if you, by accident or unknowingly, flip the order of the run Maven dependency go offline and the copy source. So first you do copy, run. And then you change a little bit of your source code. So in that case, imagine what would happen.
And that's why we're drawing this parfait, because the whole point is if you need to change this one, then you have to get all the way down to this blue layer and take all that stuff out and then change it and then put it back. And it doesn't always go back in as beautifully as it went down in the first place.
Yeah. And that dependency go offline can take like a couple of minutes to run. So if you accidentally put the copy source above that, then every time you change a little bit of source code, you're actually going to run, like even if you copied your pom.xml is this tiny little file. So you're not really getting efficiency from copying it. The efficiency comes from doing that run Maven dependency dependency command before copying the source code, because the copy of the source code is what's going to break it. Like that's going to be the breaking point if you change code. So you definitely want to copy the source code after you've downloaded the dependencies.
Yeah. So let's talk about chat. There's a GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, basically a way to make the world a bit data respect. Protect the user's right a little bit. Nice. Just wait until there's a US version. Hopefully this supplants like per state rules. So we have 49 fewer to worry about. I agree. So Fuel Stable says in their simplicity, they assumed the Docker spec became a single layer, but now it seems like each command in the Docker file becomes a layer.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. And and by the end of this, the only thing that we care about here at this point, the way that this Docker file is written, the only thing we care about is the jar file that we built. Going back to,
which is this is a jar file building, right?
This is the output of that Maven package is a jar file. Now, this is back to a comment. I think it was Dr. Verm who said that there's additional efficiencies that you can consider. So we'll take the simple route right now. But so we just want that jar file. And so I guess the next thing we'll do is take that jar file and put it somewhere different. But if we were being more efficient, we might actually have that jar file, like unjar it, like unzip it basically, right? It's just an archive, unzip it, and then organize the files in taking that same philosophy of like, why did we separate our POM file from our source? The reason is that we're probably going to change our source more often than our POM file. So we would unexplode that jar file and say, okay, now these are the files that correspond to the things that were the dependencies, and these are the files that correspond to the things that were my code. And so I'm also going to copy them to that final image as two different layers. Like we've used them as two different layers for the build. It would make sense to copy them as two different layers at least, right, for the runtime. But very few. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many Docker files are written to do that, I would say.
So we're talking about separating the build layer from the run layer here. So in this way, which it sounds like, just again, I need some context. Even though the build tools are wrapped into this image, this is still the way, a conventional way to do it, is what you're telling me?
This would be the conventional way to build. Yeah, this is still, you still, if you want your Docker file to build your app, you have to start with a base image that has the build tools in it. If you could just take this and deploy it to production, I mean, your jar file is in there. So you
Yeah.
could put this in production, but then you put your JDK into production and Maven into production, and you don't need those things in production. And so generally the philosophy about production is the less stuff, if you only have what you need, that you're not exposing yourself to danger from like having bits in there you don't need.
So you're telling me you could use this to build a jar file that is a run jar file?
That's a good image. You can use that.
An image.
Yeah,
This,
like
you use
if
this.
you yeah, if you want to, you're done. Yeah, like why not?
Okay.
You have a jar file, right? Like it'll run.
Okay.
If you do a
What do companies generally do? What's common practice?
It would not be good if you, I think if you saw like an enterprise, yeah, I mean, the right thing to do is to deploy to production only what you need in production. So it would
That wasn't
not
my question though, Cora.
what do companies normally do? I mean, I think I don't know the answer to that question, but like I feel that this technology is like close to 10 years old, and so I would be a little surprised if like, especially like enterprises with like, yeah, but also, you know, large enterprises can get messy. And so unless you have, because this is the other challenge, right? Like every Git repo, so either every Git repo has a Docker file in it, in which case it's very hard to control what each developer or development team is doing. And maybe you have some Docker files in there that were written 8 years ago that have this issue, and nobody, you know, generally like if it ain't broke, don't fix it also, right? So you might have a lot of images in production that actually, yeah, and or you'll have, you know, a DevOps team that has said, oh, we're all using this Docker file. So in that case, you know, then you have to organize your whole enterprise and make sure that you have a good CI/CD process so that everybody is leveraging this central process, which also there's often like rogue teams or teams you haven't onboarded yet. So yeah, it's.
So I have some comments. Fuel Steel was asking if I have a jar inside my Parfait cup. I do. The top green layer is my jar in the Parfait. So yes. Or I guess maybe the mental image of a physical glass jar and a glass Parfait dish just sitting on top is kind of fun. Companies are still not set in best practices, says Nick, even though the technology has been around 10 years. Large enterprises can get messy. No. They don't. Dr. Burns says people do crazy things with Docker files. I've had to rebuild things while shake my head the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, shake his head.
Shake my head. Yeah, I think. So for efficiency's sake, maybe right now we're saying best practice would be to build another Docker file that uses this, but produces only the run images without the tools to build it. Maybe we don't need to go into exactly how that is done because we're all excited to talk about Buildpacks. But
yeah, we can do that.
Well, I mean,
but or let's say, okay, let's do one compromise, which would be to say, yeah. So if you were doing this, if you were going to write the second, this is called a stage, a build. This is your build stage.
This whole thing is a build stage.
It's a stage. So if you had a Docker file, you would have two blocks of code. Each one starts with a from statement. So when you get to the second from statement in your file, then it's going to, you know, start from a new image, and you can refer to this, or you can give this one an alias, or you can just call it stage 0. I think it's indexed by 0. So you would say, start with a new one. And the only difference, I mean, you can choose any base image, but like, let's say for this, it would make sense to say the same, let's stick with adopt open JDK because that's what we've vetted. And instead of the 11 JDK hotspot, you would say the 11 JRE hotspot. So now you have the Java runtime environment because you don't need the development kit. And then you would basically, you would refer to this and say from stage 0, copy the jar file, which by convention would be in /workspace/target jar.
So there'd be a second from statement?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's how you throw this one out, right? You're not actually going to use this. The only thing you want to salvage from here is that jar file. So you start with a second from statement, and you say from that other thing that I did, I just pull that jar file.
Okay. I'm going to erase this later to make room for Buildpacks, but let's write it down for now. I don't want to write exactly the thing, but from JRE instead of JDK.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
So
And then
then you
from
would
again.
say, no, just that one from.
Okay.
Just the one. You could, you could have, if you wanted, another work dir, that's optional, but it's
Okay.
nice. And so you would have a copy command, basically.
So wait, okay, so from stage 0 that you were talking about before goes under a copy command?
It's under a copy command, yeah, so this is optional.
Okay, so we might do a work dir.
Yeah, we could do like the same.
Oh.
Are we both
Are you
frozen?
there?
I'm
yeah,
here.
I think we're back. Cool.
Okay. So yeah, so what you really need is a copy command.
Okay.
So you're gonna say -- copy, yeah, and then -- from. And here is where you say equals. And then I forget the syntax, if it's like maybe stage -0 or something like that. You can also alias the first one to give it a specific name. But let's say it's stage -0.
And we're referencing what when we say stage 0?
The
we're
first
referencing
one. Yeah.
We're referencing our jar?
No, you're referencing the entire image. So
got it.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, in the first from statement, you could append to the end of the first one, the JDK one, you could append a capital AS as like, at the end of that line, on the same line. If you write as in capital letters and then call it like build.
Okay.
And then that you could use that name instead of stage 0. So you can alias it.
Heard. Okay.
Yeah. So now you're saying from that image, now you have to say what you want to copy. So we know that our jar file is in /workspace /target.
Yeah.
And it's all that same line, yeah. /workspace.
Okay. /target.
/target. And then you don't know what the name of the jar file is, right? Because you want this to work for any application. And that jar file, like it's got the name of your app kind of built into the name automatically by Maven. So what you want to do is just say /star.jar.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you'll get that. That's the only file that you will get. And then you want to say what you're going to call it. Yeah.
I have a question. In my mental model, am I using this parfait as a layer in a parfait, or am I putting all these a whole new parfait?
New parfait.
Okay.
Nobody wants that parfait. That's it's like too heavy.
Okay. There's no such thing as too big of a parfait.
That's like the one that you eat by yourself and nobody sees you, and then you have the one that you're like bringing
the little dainty one. That's hilarious.
We're just gonna scoop like the fruit off the top of that one and put it in our new one.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Right on.
So, okay, so we're copying from that first one, that little fruit we want, that berry, that jar file, and we're going to say that in our new one, you could just say app.jar, which is generic, right? Which is great because, yeah, so right after that jar that you wrote, star.jar, space on the same line, app.jar.
Okay. Same line, app.jar.
Or yeah, if you want under, but like, yeah, it's the same.
Yeah,
for
I just
Dockerfile,
it's
the same. Yeah,
screen. Yeah.
For Docker, it's the same one. So, okay, so now this is what we've done, right? We've said, okay, we don't want that same base image because that base image had too much stuff for a production system. So we want this new base image that just has something that we trust and want in production. And just pick that little piece we want off the first parfait, which is just the jar file, nothing else, and copy it into the new parfait.
Okay.
So now if you drew that parfait, now it has 2 layers in it. And then, so here's the other thing. So because it's everything about this Dockerfile is our responsibility as the authors of the Dockerfile. So if you now deploy this Dockerfile, the image from this Docker, like in its totality, right? The Dockerfile will run the first from thing and then the second from block. If you throw this into production, then the default user that will be running processes when this starts is more likely than not the root user within your container. And that's can be a problem for two reasons. Number one is you don't necessarily want to give the default process more permissions than it needs. And second, you might be, for example, that if you're in a Kubernetes environment that doesn't even allow containers to run as root, then this won't run, right? So there's a Docker command called user. So you could change the default user, and you can just put like a user, like make up a user ID, like 1001 or 1002 or whatever you want.
Okay.
And it will, it will create it, and it will. You can be fancier and actually create a user, but like this is the minimum.
Okay.
And so, and then the next thing is this, you would have needed this in the first one if we had decided to not do a second one, but okay, you throw this container somewhere, Docker daemon or Kubernetes, and like Kubernetes is like, okay, awesome. What do I do with this? Like, do I run start? Do I run, like, how do I kick this thing off? So you have to add a command. You have to tell Kubernetes, this is the command that you run. And for that, there's actually two ways to do that, but like for simplicity, there's one command called entry point and one called command. So for simplicity, let's just say CMD for command.
Okay.
So that's in all caps. And then it's like, again, right, there's like, you can have a whole conversation about like, how are you going to format this command and like, what are the implications? But essentially you want to tell, like the way that I have it written in my Dockerfile is in square brackets. I have 3 strings, like a 3 comma separated strings, but essentially what it's going to do is you want it to run Java minus jar and then the name of your jar file. Like you want the Java command that starts your application to be. So if you wanted to pseudocode that as Java start, that's okay. But yeah, there are considerations here. And the considerations are, you know, they will impact, like if your process is the root process to start, or if it's a sub process, which might impact like what happens when you try to shut it down. If like when Kubernetes tries to shut down your application, it's going to send a signal to this container, and so the sort of the root process is going to receive that signal. And if Java is your root process, then it'll stop it. But if you have a shell script that starts Java instead, then it's questionable that shell script will pass on the shutdown command to your Java process. So there are definitely things to consider in like how you set up the command or the entry point. But now you have, now this is better, right? Because now you've got a Docker image that has less things, that is not running as root, that has a command that hopefully responds well to shutdowns. And the only thing that we didn't do here is to take that jar file and explode it in the build image so that we could copy it as at least two or more layers separately and have 2 copy commands instead of the one. Yeah.
So that would be the one thing we could do to make this better. But
that would be
pretty much this is a best practice version of a Docker file.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, for late board conversation, streaming conversation, it's not perfect.
Yeah, we go back to Dr. Berg's comment that people do crazy things with Docker files. Exactly. So who knows what else? There's other things.
How do you avoid having fragile shared Docker images? So to elaborate, Fuel Stable says, at my last place we had shared AMI images. What does AMI stand for, please?
Like the base image.
Okay, but they were very fragile and not tested either, making it difficult to do changes to them. And when upgrading to the latest AMI, like a good citizen, it would often break something like the logging system that you don't immediately notice.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's why Docker files are hard. That from image and who maintains it, and like what is their promise that if they change that base image, that it won't break the layers, that the rest of the layers, or the interaction between the rest of the layers. Like, it's a great question, and I don't Dockerfile in itself as a system does not provide a good answer for that question. And these are some of the reasons why there are other approaches, and why Cloud Native Buildpacks is one option to consider.
Nick says we're making him hungry by talking about the parfait so much. So Fuel Table, tongue in cheek, says, "What? There are more users than just root?" Not on my Linux box. Okay. So this has been, this is me learning about the show better, but I honestly think like doing one episode about Dockerfiles and then a separate episode about Cloud Native Buildpacks probably would have been the best way to approach this. I didn't, in my naivete, I didn't realize how complex that this one topic could be. Because, and then boot camp, it was a much simpler process. There were no like build versus run stages. But so we ended up with a pretty lightweight parfait. Before I erase this side and we talk about Buildpacks, do you want to maybe go through some of the drawbacks of with Dockerfiles?
Yeah, I mean, So, I mean, it's basically everything that we've seen, right? Like you're writing this script, and the script that you just wrote is on your board, and like, there's no way for you to say, "Hey, Cora, let's make sure that you and I are using the same Dockerfile," short of copy paste, right? Okay, I'll take it from your GitHub repo and I'll copy it into mine. And then you decide to improve something, then, what you're going to remember to tell me, or I have to notice that you changed it and then go update mine and retest my application. And like, who's going to be monitoring that Java or the, Linux underlying this didn't have a different, a patch that we need, or even if you run this today on your computer, and you build your Java app, and then you come back, or you go to a different machine next week and you run the exact same Dockerfile with the exact same code. If Java 11 had a new minor version that was, published as a new Dockerfile, using this granularity of a label that only says 11 and not like 11 dot whatever, that means that on those two different runs, you're actually going to get two different JDK. One will be patched and one will not be patched, right? They'll have different versions. So there's not enough precision in the versioning. Same thing with Maven, right? Did you just say Maven 3, or did you say Maven 3.6 or 3.6 dot something? So the second time you run this I mean, I say a different machine because if you're running it locally, you might just use you might, just reuse the layers that are already in the image that you have in cache. But, or if you delete the Dockerfile, the Docker images on your machine, and you rerun it on your own machine, let's say a week later, you might be working with a different minor version of Maven or a different minor version of Java 11. So you're not actually producing the exact same image. And there's no way to know, because the Dockerfiles doesn't do anything to, for example, like other systems that have been created since the onset of Dockerfiles, like Jib did this, Cloud Native Buildpacks does this. The SHA that results from building your Dockerfile is the same as if you do build it on two different names, the digest or the SHA for that image is the same. So visually, you can verify that they're the same. Kubernetes, if you put those both images, can compare the SHA and know those are the same. But if you do it with Dockerfile, if you get clone, like anything changes, like the last mod time on a file that is irrelevant to the actual result, Dockerfile will produce a different SHA. There's no guarantee that helps you or an automated system validate that two images built at different times are actually the same. So if you're building images on your computer, and then you look at the list of images and you're like, were these two the same code base or not? Like, this one's working, that one's not working. How do I know if they're the same or different? Dockerfile is not going to help you figure that out.
Basically. So from everything you just said, for drawbacks, I have that it needs to be monitored. So if there's an update that needs to be performed in one of the dependencies, someone needs to be watching for that and keeping an eye out for it. Precision and versioning is costly because it needs to be monitored or may need to be rebuilt. Everything on top of it.
But lack of precision is at the expense of repeatability. There's no guarantee. Yeah.
Okay.
And then secure
Okay, that's
everything
the
about
point.
it. Yeah, and everything about this is up to you. Like, is it secure enough to say
Mm-hmm.
to just change the user? That's the only security measure we have here. Like, is that enough? You know,
Yeah. So, so it's not, there's no guarantee it's repeatable. Should I put something about security on here?
everything is. I mean, it's
Security
all
is
your
not addressed.
responsibility. So it's
Okay.
everything is your responsibility. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Security, your responsibility. And then, I think we should, so it's not repeatable, it's not reliable, security and upkeep, all of it is your responsibility.
Yeah, and there's no built-in like security is a responsibility. Any optimizations, like for the sake of time and space here, we didn't take that jar file, explode it, and copy it in a couple of layers.
Uh-huh.
But that is an optimization. That's a choice. Like you can get away with not doing it, or you might want to do it, right? And
Uh-huh.
so everything is
And
everything is on you.
and then something I think we talked when we were going through this, if something at a lower level, like an operating system or a dependency like log4j out of my, just off the top of my head needs done, then in this parfait dish, we have to take out all the layers and destroy all the layers. It's not like we
Yeah,
can keep them. All the
yeah,
caching that happens on top. So this whole parfait is destroyed, and then we're digging down in this one and getting to the place where we can fix the
correct.
log4j. And
Yeah,
then everything's destroyed, so we have to rebuild all the layers that go on top of that. And then there's always
yeah,
risk in rebuilding too.
yeah, and it's slower. Yeah, there's risk, and it's slower. Yeah.
So updating, fixing patches is problematic, or fixing patches, invalidating cache. I'm not sure the right words.
It's inefficient and more risky
Okay,
to have to
I like
recreate
that.
layers that didn't change.
Okay, NEFF. Okay. Is there anything else we should put here when talking about Docker files? I'd also like to visit our chat.
I think here Java Grunt says he sums it up.
Yeah.
Dockerfiles is bad.
You spilled packs. And then also we have I'm bad at Elise Mendiva. Doing this at scale is a pain. I can imagine doing
Oh
it.
yeah.
Yeah. It seems like rickety and just like hard to manage. And it really is. The fact that you say this has been the technology for 10 years, as a complete newbie, I'm just like wondering like what's been going on? But I guess that comes back to Dr. Verm, like the things that Dr. Verm has seen with some
Yeah.
crazy Docker files make a lot of sense, or Docker images, excuse me, make a lot of sense given that there's so many ways that this can go wrong. Like if this
Yeah.
was a bridge, I wouldn't want to cross that bridge. I would be afraid of falling. um,
Yeah.
don't remind me of Java versioning issues. My PTSD stays in. And Nick, the first one, it's like we're right back to it runs on my machine with Docker files. We've come full circle.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Verm says Dagger IO solves some of these issues building repeatable Docker files. Depends on the exact version selection, which itself creates a lot of chore tasks. So it can be a little better with this Dagger tool, but not fixed completely, it sounds
Yeah.
like. All right. I'm going to erase some of this board. Fuel Stable is asking, what about Nix OS? I don't know.
What Nix OS.
Some claim it's the savior.
I don't know. I'll have to look into
I can't speak to that. Yeah. If maybe someone else in chat will know. So I'm going to erase this side for build packs. Is that going to be enough room? If I just delete our run image?
We'll
I'm
try it.
saying delete it's a freaking cloth and some glass cleaner. Delete.
I trust you.
Well, I mean, you're the one who knows the amount of information, so that's why I'm asking.
I don't actually know
feedback.
how. I don't have a image in my mind of what this is gonna look like drawn preemptively.
Okay.
But I trust your visual.
Sounds like an adventure.
Skills.
Well, I'll take a page from Cora's book and be like, I don't know what's happening there. Let
I
me
don't
run toward it.
Yeah.
That's a great way to be, and I think it's not very natural for many people. I think I've gotten there after a lot of work.
Oh,
But
I think
yeah.
I don't know that I see myself that way, but it's a nice image.
All right. Thanks for being patient. Oh, here we have something. We talk about Nix from the chat. Cora.
So
Dr.
Dr.
Berm has
Berm
something to
says
say.
that Nix has its own issues. And we'll refrain from my digression, but the UX is not aligned with where the ecosystem looks to be. Interesting.
Okay. Oh, I just made it worse.
So I guess maybe not the savior.
The savior sounds so dramatic. Like we'll be wearing, yeah. So the war room and the savior. All
Dev
right.
Retro says your light board is light years better than Vim. More colorful.
Yeah, there are different
Right.
criteria that I would. Yeah.
It's funny.
If we,
Fuel Snavel says Docker used to be the savior. Yes.
Yeah. That's how I learned it.
True.
The end all be all. All right. Build
Yes. So Buildpacks, it basically takes, so what Buildpacks retains is this idea of the two-stage build. So that's a good thing that we saw, right? We didn't want to put that command at the end of our first from block because we don't want to put the JDK and all the stuff that we don't need into production.
Okay.
So inherent in the build pack process is this idea of a two-stage. So you will have a build image and a run image. Now with build packs, everything is there's two aspects of build packs. There's sort of like the concept of it, which basically manifests as some APIs. So it's not really like the build packs project didn't like necessarily give us a solution. They just said, here's a concept of how you would design a system that would address a lot of these problems that we're having with Dockerfiles. And so it basically provided two APIs. One is called a platform API and one's called a build pack API. But let's focus on the build pack API.
Okay.
And so the build pack, it's funny because I don't know what this is going to look like drawn. So I'll just,
I don't either.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right.
We'll do what we need to do.
Basically, so there's two primary APIs that the Buildpacks project created. This is like back into 2018. What was then Pivotal and Heroku got together and they said, there was this thing called Buildpacks that existed from 2011, but that has its own set of drawbacks when looked at within the context of Kubernetes, especially. So we want to take the good stuff from that idea and re-implement this, redesign it so it works well for the world of Kubernetes. And so they came up with these two APIs, the platform and the Buildpack API. And so the Dockerfiles would be replaced by an implementation of the Buildpack API. And so if you're looking for one to use, there's a few out there. Paketo is one, Heroku has one, Google published one. I don't know what others there are, but those are the three, I think, main open source ones.
Okay.
Three main open source implementations, I would say.
Okay, I'm writing it from my face. Paketo, Google, and Heroku.
Yeah.
And then each one of these, you say, replaces a Dockerfile?
No, each one of these replaces many Dockerfiles. Replaces hopefully hopefully most of your Dockerfiles, if not all of your Dockerfiles. Yeah. So the Buildpack API essentially has two main steps. One of them is a detection step where it will look at your application. So in the same way that when you run your Dockerfile, you do it like within a context and you say like, my code is here. So when I do a copy POM XML or copy my source code into this image, where you're copying from, that's your context, right? So when you're building an image using Buildpacks, it looks at that same sort of concept of a context where your code is, and it says, let me detect what is in here. I don't need you to tell me that I need Maven. I don't need you to tell me, what to do here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me figure it
So the
out.
first step is detection?
Detect, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Scott Rosenberg is here in
oh, hey, Scott.
in YouTube. Hi, Scott. Scott is a Tanzu super user. He's been our guest over on Tanzu Tuesdays 2 times, and he will be again next week. So detect.
Yeah, so detect. So basically this is, so this is a stage where the Buildpacks process as a whole looks at your directory where your app is and says, yeah, what's here? And it decides on its own, what do I need in order to produce an image out of the files that are in here?
It decides, so it has the logic on its own. What everything you need about your environment, your dependencies, your
well, your dependencies, like if you have a Java app, the dependencies for your Java app are still in your POM XML. But the Buildpack detection stage will look at that directory and say, oh, there is a POM XML. Therefore, this is a Java Maven application.
Okay.
Like class, it classifies your app, And so then it would say, okay, so it would look at this directory and it would basically figure out it's not that the process looks at the directory and says, if there's a POM file, then it's Java. That's not the way it works, actually. The way that it works is that there's all these little modules of code, and what it and the Buildpacks, let's say you're using Paketo, Paketo would provide, this is all built into this OSS product that we're using, right? It's all built into Paketo, but there exists a list of all of these pieces of software, these modules, in a particular order. And so what the process does is it presents your code directory to each one of these modules in the order that they're listed and says, is this for you? Do you know what to do with this? So if this would be shown to the Java Buildpack, the Java Buildpack would look at this directory and say, oh yeah, there's a Java application in this directory. I'm the Buildpack for this. And then it would hand it to the Gradle Buildpack, and it would say, are you supposed to act on this? And the Gradle Buildpack would look at this and be like, no, there's no Gradle build file here. I'm out. And then it would show it to the Maven Buildpack and say, is this for you? And the Maven Buildpack would say, oh, look at this. There's a POM XML. I'm in. This is for me. So by virtue of that, so the beauty of that is that the know-how of how to recognize if a Buildpack should act on a certain set of code is within the Buildpack, right? There's no outside process that has to know how you'd know if something is Python or Ruby or PHP or Java, but rather that intelligence is all contained inside of the Buildpack, right? It's very microservice sort of design, right?
Okay.
So at the end of this detection process, out of, I don't know, maybe like 100 Buildpacks, we're going to end up with the list of Buildpacks that we need in order to take this source and churn it into an image.
So the logic is here in the detect stage in the Buildpack API, and then the actual environments themselves are the module pieces made by whoever did that particular implementation.
The logic of the ability to present code to a Buildpack and say, is this something you want to act on? Should I include this Buildpack in the list? That is part of it's not part of the Buildpacks API implementation. That's a separate piece of software called the lifecycle that does that. That says it presents the code. That's the detection stage, I guess, right? The build is going to happen. There's various stages, but when we get to that detect stage, the thing that's running that detection stage, what that thing is, that piece of software is called the lifecycle. But what it's doing is it takes your source code directory, your like the directory where that you said this is what I want you to turn into an image, and it presents it to a build pack. So that's generic, right? The lifecycle will only do the stuff that's generic. So if presenting code to a build pack and saying yes or no, do you want to act on this? That you can do for anything, right? But the intelligence of knowing, is this Java, is this Python, is this PHP, that has to be part of the implementation. So yeah, so if it's like language specific knowledge, it's part of the implementation of the Buildpack API. And if it's a generic kind of like just the mechanics of, you know, figuring these things out, like just asking the Buildpack the question and including it or not including it in the final list of Buildpacks, that would be the life cycle.
Cool.
So the life cycle, in a way, like when you run your Docker file,
We have a question from chat. How does Buildpack work with multi-language repos or mono repos? Detection would seem more difficult. Maybe there are patterns or requirements.
That's a really good. I unfortunately don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if somebody else in chat does know the answer to that question.
I know about KPack and using when I learned KPack and was making a builder, I would provide an order of build packs to look at for those builders, but I could customize what I wanted. Like if I wanted, I could customize a certain group of build packs that I wanted to be viewed. So I feel I know those can be built.
But I guess the question is maybe without customizing the build packs, do they handle like a Git repo that is actually?
Yeah.
So I guess it's custom. Okay. So out of the box, they won't do it.
So yeah. So Scott Rosenberg says you need a custom build pack, and then Java Grunt says you create your own builder to meet your needs. And what I'm thinking about in KPack is creating your own builder, creating the builder.
Yeah, it would be.
And everyone agrees.
I think I would say that the answer by Scott is probably the most precise in terms of like what you need is a custom build pack. And when you have a custom build pack, you can create your own builder that includes your custom build pack, or you can simply include your custom build pack in the process at the command line. Like you can use a default builder and add your custom build pack. But if you're going to share this with your organization, you would probably want to include that custom build pack with your other build packs so that, you know, people don't have to combine.
So the builder can do it all.
But the customization is in the build pack.
Java Grunt says creating your own builder is pretty simple, and then refers to the buildpacks.io website.
Yeah. So, and I guess just to clarify, so what I'm referring to is the life cycle. It's literally some code that was written by the creators of the specification, because they basically realized that, you know, if Paketo is going to have an implementation of Buildpacks, and Google is going to have one, and Heroku is going to have one, then is it frozen? Can you still hear me? Oh, I think I can.
Are you there, Cora?
Yeah. Okay.
The last thing I heard is that, the life cycle is literally just a piece of code that.
Yeah. So the life cycles. Okay. So the build packs, the creators of the build packs project, right, who only defined the specifications. They didn't implement build packs for any language. They were like, here's an API. If you want to provide build packs, implement this API. What they realized was that if Google and Paketo and Heroku are all going to implement build packs, and maybe you want to write a custom build pack too, if you want
Uh-huh.
all these things to work, like let's say from a CLI or something like that, there's going to be some like generic steps that everybody would have to repeat. And so why have everybody write the same code? So they took all of that
Yeah.
generic stuff and provided basically a reference implementation of that generic stuff. And that's what's in the life cycle. So you can just use that. And when you make a build pack implementation, you just have to add like Paketo's opinions about how you build a Java application, or Heroku's opinions about how you build a PHP application, or however you want to do it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
So
this detect is not part of the life cycle?
the detect is, yeah, because the idea of
Okay.
presenting a directory to a build pack, and basically, the build pack has a detect API, right? So if you're writing a build pack, you have to write some code that responds to a detect API on yourself. Like you're told, right? If you want to write a build pack, you have to have a detect API, you implement it. So the Java implementation would look at your code and say, I'm looking for a POM file, or I'm looking for a Gradle build file. But the fact that you're able to call a detect on the build pack and expect a Boolean answer about yes or no, that's generic. So the lifecycle is the part that calls that API, and based on the answer includes or doesn't include it in a final list.
Got it. We have a question in the chat by El Nemesis Divina. I got your name right this time. Is there a way not to load all build packs in the local repository?
Like into your local Docker repository? Yes, there is a way. Yeah. So if you're just using like the default open source builder provided by, any of these three providers, then obviously they're going to include all of their stuff in one image so that you don't have to go chasing stuff. But if you're going to provide that within your own company, yeah, you can create your own builder. And there's, as I think Java Grunt put a link online, but it's not that complicated. You can pull pieces out of the default ones and say, like, if you're only building Java and Node applications, then you can just pull those things and create your own and leave out the pieces that you don't want. So yeah.
So if I'm a developer, I would have build pack API somehow running locally, and I would have a builder available locally. And then when I want to make an image of my code, I would instruct the builder and I would show it my code base. And then the builder would go through all of the available build packs and figure out which build pack needs to be used to build the environment for my code.
Yes.
So does that, like, all of this stuff on the Docker side we don't have to do? That's all handled by beautiful.
And that would, and that brings us to the second step, which is like, okay, now that I have the list of build packs that it takes in order to turn this code into an image, let's go ahead and run them, right? We've got them in order. So now we have to run one after the other, which is kind of the same as, on the left-hand side, you're running commands one after the other. So, and then to the El Nemesis Divina question about, is there a way, oops, let me put that up there. Is there a way not to load all build packs on a local repository? So as I mentioned, yes, if you build your own builder, the builder doesn't have to have the build packs for stuff that you're not going to use. But one thing to keep in mind is that in the same way that we were seeing in a Dockerfile, that it's a two-stage process, the build packs for languages that you don't use are in your build environment. But when build packs, then after compiling your code, and determining if there's other things you need for runtime, it will move all of the things you need for runtime into a run image, just like we did in the second stage of our Dockerfile. So all of those build packs are not going to make it to your production system. So I don't know if there's like a huge concern about having more than you need in your builder. It makes maybe things a little bit faster. But
that makes a lot of sense. Builder doesn't make it into production.
Exactly. And if
builder
you're working,
makes the images.
Yeah, and you're only really going to download that builder unless I do this, I clean up my Docker images all the time, so I end up downloading it a lot. But if you're going to if you're, build, if you leave it there, it's local, so you're not re-downloading it from the internet. So, right. So then you run all of them. And so the other interesting thing about a Buildpack implementation is that not only does it include the Buildpacks, which the Buildpacks essentially replace everything in your Dockerfile except for the run command, except for the from command, right? They know when to like how to build your app, and then like how to do it efficiently. So if you first dependencies, then source, take the jar file in its exploded form, and also organized in in a way that like you're separating the things that change often from the things that don't change often, and like many other things that would be way too much work to put into a Docker file. All of that intelligence is built into the Buildpack. So now we're left with the from statements, right? If we're maintaining this concept of doing a build on one image and then moving the layers that we care about, that we're interested in, into a second smaller image to put into our production environment, what are those two images? And that is also provided by the Buildpack implementation. So literally the Buildpacks completely replace your Docker files.
So benefits of Buildpacks. What I'm hearing is, well, you don't have all of this stuff that has a lot of opinions, and it sounds like every person who writes a Dockerfile is going to write it slightly differently from one another. So you're not going to end up with the exact same image forever. So this is like a lot more consistent.
Yeah. You're basically delegating the specialization of knowing, how to handle different languages most efficiently, but also how to handle all of these security concerns and all of this, like organizing your Docker image in a way so that it's not as sensitive to this idea that if you change one layer, you have to throw everything else away. Like all of these learnings from working with Dockerfiles were incorporated, but you're basically placing your trust in either the committers behind Paketo. Paketo is an evolution of what used to be Cloud Foundry Buildpacks, and it's an open source project sponsored, I guess, or it's funded, I guess, by VMware. So you're placing your trust in the Paketo development group, or the Google Buildpacks development group, or the Heroku Buildpacks development group, or whatever you choose, to specialize in these responsibilities. And also you're accepting their support in the sense that these are open source, but like in the sense that if there is an update if there is a CVE to the operating system or to the runtime that you're using, they will issue an update to the builder, and so you can just rebuild your images. But you're not on the hook for having to be monitoring if there's a PHP runtime vulnerability or a Python runtime vulnerability. Like you're delegating this to a specialized group of people. So that's part of it, right? Rather than everybody making these decisions and owning the maintenance responsibility of each of these decisions over time. And because again, to write a really good Docker file, we've already seen, right, in that first run statement where we just kind of like pseudocoded install Maven, there's a lot of knowledge about like package management on a Linux machine, for example, right? That's one area of specialization that not every developer, not every Dockerfile author has. When we got to the second one and we set the user to be 1002, well, that's some security knowledge. So it takes security and experience that maybe not every Dockerfile author has, right? So there's a lot of different kind of like, a lot of different experience that you have to incorporate into a properly composed build process. And so here you're saying, I trust this provider of Buildpacks to know what they're doing. So you are accepting their opinions. And yet also Buildpacks gives you hooks, right? As we've been saying here, that you can customize and you can add customizations of your own. But here, Java Grunt is saying it this way. Build packs allow for best practice to be distributed across organizations without copy paste.
Nice. That's exactly what we've been talking about was missing,
Nice.
or even also talking about someone's talking about flimsy Docker images that they are being
fragile.
asked to use. Fragile,
Yeah. And also, where do you get this? Where are all these build packs? Where are these base images that I'm supposed to use for my build time and my runtime, right? Well, to make it easy, the only thing that you have to download from the internet in order to get build packs is an image called a builder. That builder is going to have all of the build packs in it, and it's going to have that piece of code that's called the lifecycle in it, and the builder is the build image. So it is that it's built on that first image you use in your from statement. And it has metadata inside of it that points to the from statement that would be the image that would be mentioned in the second from statement. So all you need is this one image and you have everything that you need, right? So you don't have to go to your friend and say, hey, can you give me your GitHub URL so I can copy your Docker file into my repo? You just need to know the address of one image that's sitting in Docker Hub or it's sitting mirrored in GCR, and anybody in the world has access to that same one. So our Dockerfile, as Java Grant is saying, our Dockerfile best practices are distributed across everything, orgs or the world.
So the builder that you download is one of the implementations. It's either a Paquito builder or a Google builder or a Heroku builder. Yes. Okay. Nice. And then what I'm hearing too is you have remarkable consistency now from you and from Java Grunt that you have it's going to be built the exact same way every time. And it has that digest on the end that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So now the only way that you and I would, when you get that image, that is the builder, right? And again, the builder includes it's built on that image from the first from statement that we saw.
This is basically a builder.
The builder would be the from statement. So it's built on the build image. And then the build packs add everything else, right? So not actually, that's not even true. It's because the builder does not have JDK installed on it, right? Because it might not be a Java app. So the builder is more like your base Ubuntu image. With some utilities that you need, right? That's the build image. And then the build packs are gonna, if it's Java, then the build packs will add JDK. If it's Maven, then the build packs will add Maven. If it's Gradle, they'll add Gradle instead. If it's
got it.
Go, it'll add other stuff, right? So but the build packs are on that Ubuntu image. So it's basically an Ubuntu image with some necessary utilities, the lifecycle code, of course, that you need to run this whole process, to orchestrate this whole process, all of the build packs that are candidates, not necessarily that they'll be executed, but they're candidates. So, and it has also a pointer to the image that would be in the from statement of your second clause, right? Of your second stage, which is really that same Ubuntu image with less utilities in it. And without the lifecycle and without the build packs, right? Just kind of like the purest form of that base image.
Got it.
So the only way that if you and I were running the process with build packs on 2 different days or on 2 different machines and we got different results is if when you called the builder and I called the builder, again, we just used latest, right? And then we are getting different versions of the builder. But as long as we're using the same versions of the builder and the same versions of the code, then we're guaranteed to have the same result.
That's impressive. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to say there's so much all of the efficiencies that can be built into for example, right, within the Paquito, the Paquito development team is the one I'm most familiar with because they're part of VMware, right? So, but they've got, and I'm sure Google and Heroku are similar, but they've got specialists that contribute knowledge to standardize these best practices, as you were saying, for security, for efficiency, some generic things, but then they've also got language specialty teams that will know for example, for Java, right? This whole like exploding the files, putting them in order, or that actually came from the Spring team, or doing things like memory calculation,
Yeah,
how to better manage memory, all these
that
things
that
that you
makes
probably wouldn't
a,
do.
a ton of sense from like thinking about when you're writing a Docker file, the fact that you need to explode a jar and redo it. Like that's not a problem that's unique to you. That's a problem that's going to happen every time. So why not make that part of that best practices part? Let's offload that. Let's do it one time. Everyone can
Yeah.
agree this is the best way. It's open source, so if you don't agree, you can go
Yeah.
join the community and talk to them about it. But that makes so much sense not to do that over and over again.
Yeah. And then if you look at, if you look inside of a Docker file, if you built it if you look inside of an image and you built it using a Docker file,
that's what I am
chances,
leaving space here for.
oh yeah.
What does a build pack image look like? If our Dockerfile image is a parfait, what's our build packs image?
Well, it's still layers. There are still, like, the image itself is still composed of layers, but the way that the organization of all of the file system is a lot more, it's less random, right? Because it doesn't depend on like however I decided to do things when I wrote my Docker file. It's very structured.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you can actually, there's a tool called Dive that allows you to look into the file structure of an image. And so, yeah, I guess one way to draw it would be like, yeah, so everything is a lot more standardized. And so a layer, you might, for example, if the Java build pack, for example, runs, right? Then the Java build pack is going to add the JDK, right? Because we need to build our app. And it's also going to create a layer with the JRE in it, because the runtime image that we have, right? That image that we're going to use in that second, the equivalent of the image that would be in the second from statement with our two-stage Docker file, that is more vanilla, right? In our Dockerfile example, our second from statement pointed to an adopt open JDK image that had the JRE in it. But in this case, because build packs are more standard, that final runtime image is intended to house either a Java app or a Python app or a Ruby app or anything. So you don't want to pre-populate it with the runtime for any particular framework. That means that in the build stage, the build is responsible for acquiring all of the bits, not just the jar file, exploded or non-exploded, but also the duntime, also the JRE, right? So in the case of the build image, during the build process, what's happening is that the builder is downloading JDK and JRE, and it's organizing them. It's installing them into a very like organized directory structure. So it calls a directory. It says this directory is a layer that contains the JDK. This other one is this directory is called a layer that contains the JRE. So then it uses the JDK to compile your app. And then when it goes to copy the different directories that it needs into the final image, it says, okay, I don't need to copy what was the JDK. I just need to take this directory that contains the JRE, and that's going to be what I copy over as a layer. And then, to your code, it says, here's the code, exploded, organized. I'm going to copy this dependencies layer first, and then the developer code second, right? Like it's going to basically organize it better.
So in this image, we have, so what would be on the bottom? We have an operating system layer. And then we have, so this is like the actual run image, not the builder image. So we'd have a OS, we'd have a JRE.
Your run, you can call it your runtime,
because it could be anybody's.
And there's, there's others. There are others. For example, there's one build pack, for example, that it's called CA certificates. And it adds certificates to the system trust store at build and runtime, because that's another thing that we didn't do in our Docker file, right? We changed the user, which is good. It's not running as root, but there's no certificates in there to
Oh
have some
gosh,
sort
you've
of
been word
system
of
of like,
managed over there.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But the build packs, the Paketo build
So,
packs will include a layer of the CA certificates for every
okay.
image. So that's another
So,
layer
so
that's built in.
for simplicity's sake, maybe you
Mhm.
have, maybe we'll give it another layer. We have operating system, runtime, we have our dependencies, we have our actual code that we wrote, and we have
Mhm.
certificates.
Yeah, that's a
And then
good.
our code, which was the order after runtime would be dependencies and then our code, right?
Well, would do, yeah. I mean, it processes the certs before the runtime, but yeah, runtime dependencies and then user code, developer code.
Okay, so we'll do certs. So it's a little, and then user code. Okay. So, and then my understanding, so these are our layers. This, and unlike a parfait, it's kind of like a cake. This looks like a cake, but I think of it more like maybe a sandwich where the layers are very separate from one another.
Mhm.
So, oh, I didn't even mean to make it look like bread, but it totally looks like bread. So,
But it's a nice image because it doesn't have the sides of the glass kind of forcing you to like scrape out from the top. You can like access, right? You have
yeah.
access to
So
the
this
sides.
runtime tomato, if you need to pull it, if you need to fix something with your runtime, you could just take the tomato off, go get a new tomato, put a new tomato on, and everything stays the same. You don't have to destroy the layers above it, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely less sensitivity to order. I don't
Uh-huh.
know 100% if you change one thing that it won't destroy, but if it destroys another layer, it's for a good reason. Like
Okay.
if,
Because
like the build
it
packs will
also
decide.
changed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. We
something
have
big happened.
a lot in chat from Java Ground. Sorry, we've been neglecting you, Deshaun. Build packs allow for best practices to be distributed across orgs without a copy paste. Actually, I believe you said that. Spring Boot plugin will download the builder image and build packs that are needed. So if you're using Spring Boot, you don't even need to concern yourself with the builder. You don't have to know where the builder is either. It
Well,
is
yeah, I
magic.
guess maybe a little more specifically on that one, on that Spring Boot plugin
Uh-huh.
comment. Um, so so a couple of things here is that the mention of Spring Boot plugin is addresses like something we haven't talked about, which is like, okay, great, you've got all these build packs and they're available through a single image. So
Uh-huh.
everybody listening on this stream can access that same builder. We can all build images the same way, but like, okay, but like, what do you do? What do I type, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
that is that other API that we haven't, I don't think we'll probably focus on it today, but it's called the platform API. And it's kind of like, what is the
Mm-hmm.
tool that I can use to actually execute this system and produce an image? And so Spring Boot is one option. There's more. It's with Dockerfiles, you use the Docker CLI, and in the background that uses the Docker daemon, right? With
Uh-huh.
so here, but let's say Docker CLI is the tool that you're hands-on using. In the
Mm-hmm.
case of build packs, you have various options because again, the build packs project didn't give a solution, it just gave specifications. And so just as
Mm-hmm.
Paketo, Google, Heroku are implementations of build packs, you have different implementations of the tool that you can use this. And so if you want a CLI, there's a CLI called Pack that you can use. If you're a Spring Boot
Uh-huh.
developer and you don't want a separate, you just want to use Maven or Gradle, then the Spring Boot, Maven, and Gradle plugins have a goal called Build Image that will, in the background, run the life cycle and all that stuff. So yeah, we haven't talked about like the user tool. So Spring Boot plugin is one tool, and then Spring Boot by default will actually download the Paketo build packs. If you want to use Google or Heroku instead, you would need to change a setting and alter it.
Okay.
But Paketo is the default decision from Spring Boot.
Nice. Yeah. Um, you don't have to know where your builder is. You can customize your Spring initializer so you get to use your custom builder.
It's
Says
like make the
Java
right thing the
Grunt.
easy thing. Yeah.
It's well defined when we're talking about how the layers work. That's what
So
Java
yeah,
makes
so
that called.
ABI, yeah, so it sounds like API, right? It's ABI. So
Uh-huh.
So application binary interface, which is this guarantee. This has to do with this idea of like, I mean, like in a Dockerfile, if you want to change the thing in your from statement, right? If you want to change a version of Java or yeah, if you want to change something in that line, you got to throw away the whole image and recreate it. Whereas in this beautifully structured cake, there's this interface between the OS layer and all the other layers that provides sort of a guarantee of interoperability that is through this application binary interface. And because of that guarantee of interoperability between the OS layer and the other layers and this very well structured cake, that means that you can swap out the operating system layer for a different one. So the only thing that changes is your OS layers change, but you continue to use the same upper layers of your cake. So it's kind of like those magic tricks where like the magician pulls out the tablecloth and everything stays on the table.
Except it's better because somehow the musician also puts a tablecloth back under.
Another one. It's like, here's this one's dirty. Let's change the tablecloth without moving your plates. Yeah.
I got Spring Boot by default. Sounds like anime to Dev Retro. Spring Boot by default. I love that magician visual. So to rebase it, so if you need to patch an operating system, that's a great example. So how does that work in Dockerfiles versus Buildpacks?
So first of all, so just with there's two aspects of this. So purely in the context of what we've been talking about, the biggest difference is that in Dockerfile, you have to like find the Dockerfile, right? Where is it? Is it in your repo? Is it in my repo? Do I have to copy paste and git push this everywhere? Every Dockerfile has to be changed. Yeah. So you change that from statement in every Dockerfile, and that, you know, you're just changing a file. So then you have to rerun either your Docker build command at your machine or your whole CI system, start from scratch, push it all through like imperatively, and then when the Dockerfile is actually executed, it's gonna throw your whole parfait away. Like start with a new parfait.
New parfait. Yeah.
It's like it's such a waste. It's such a waste to throw away food. Don't do it. Especially dessert. Don't throw away dessert.
The whole parfait has to be trashed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And rebuilt. And who even knows, like if you're rebuilding.
Yeah, was it the same strawberry jam? Is it still?
Yeah. What new problems you might encounter? Yeah.
Yeah, because that it's a lot of like you have to, like what version of the code was it? Are you sure you're checking out the right version of the code because maybe you've advanced or like it just takes like there's more room for failure. There's more risk. There's less assurance that things are exactly the same.
And then to rebase your OS here, I like this as a sandwich more than a cake. Like it's a very structured sandwich. Like I just lift it up, take off the bottom piece of bread, put up another bottom piece of bread and set it back down.
Yeah.
So nice. Yeah. That bread got soggy. We need a fresh piece.
Take it out. Yeah.
But yeah, we still got the rest of our sandwich going strong.
Exactly. Yeah. And from a security perspective, that's huge. So that's just like in the context of what we've been talking about, that's a major difference in terms of like patching the operating system. But this point that Java brought up about like using the Spring Boot plugin, for example. So as I was saying, like that's one way to use Buildpacks, but there is a way to use Buildpacks so that they actually run kind of autonomously on a Kubernetes cluster so that you don't have to issue that Docker build or that pack build or that Spring Boot build image. You don't have to issue that command imperatively, but rather you can have a process running in Kubernetes that is just like aware of where all the Git repos that house your applications. And when you update the stack, when you update basically Paketo that your cluster is looking at, then this other platform will just say,
so we talked about that with Dockerfiles. Like
there's no way to do that with Dockerfiles.
They're just Coras gone or me.
Yeah,
so this touches on what you talked about before, having to have someone watch this and make if something changes, it's communicated within the org and everyone rebuilds accordingly. And here we're talking about a implementation on Kubernetes, at least, where everything is being watched programmatically. And so when something changes,
I mean, it's such a simplification. Like your CI, your build step in your CI system just got so much simpler and also so much more powerful and sophisticated at the same time, which is really like, that's the goal, right? You want something that's really simple to use, but that is very sophisticated in its abilities.
Make the right thing to do, the easy thing to do. Dr. Verm is also an advocate like us. Dr. Verm is an advocate for CI building, container image building, everything from nothing, because repeatability is hard and this practice improves it. It's also harder, more bookkeeping to cache there. Cache.
I mean, it's true, right? If your CI, if this is part of your CI process, then you don't have to go to every Git repo and say, hey, Spring Boot, build image, or pack, build it again, right? Yeah, this should be centralized and ideally autonomously responding to a change in that operating system from Paketo or Google or Heroku and saying, okay, I know where all the images are because I'm the one who built them. So let me just go swap out the OS and all of these. So like the whole restaurant, pull out the tablecloth and put in a new one for everybody or all your sandwiches.
So Dr. Verm, you're saying you prefer the container image building everything from nothing every time, as opposed to
the continuous integration to automate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I've missed
Kpack, like Kpack would be better. Yeah. Continuous integration.
Cool. So what I'm hearing for what Buildpacks are, there are three components to Buildpacks. You have the actual implementation, which we have Paketo and Google and Heroku all have versions that you can implement.
They all have OSS. Yeah, there's commercial
OSS.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So these are the three open source versions. I know Tanzu Build Service has
Tanzu is the commercial superset of Paketo.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Buildpack is three things. The first thing is the actual implementation, the language specific knowledge. Then we have the life cycle, which is just has detect and run stages as opposed to, and also other stages, but that's going to be just like, it's going to capture the logic that has to happen regardless of the language specific knowledge is captured here in the life cycle. And then we also have tools. So lots of different ways to implement Cloud Native Buildpacks, whether that's Spring Boot, we talked about on Kubernetes, we talked about just, it seems like there's a vanilla builder you can just download and use. Those are the tools we've touched on.
Yeah. And then I guess just to add a little color there is that when the platform of your choice, whether it's the Pack CLI or the Spring Boot plugin or this Kpack product that runs autonomously in a cluster, what that product is doing, that platform, right, implementation of the platform API, it's going to use the life cycle, which is this reference implementation from the team, in order to orchestrate, it'll orchestrate all of the steps in the life cycle. And that life cycle, two of those, I think there's 5 or 6 steps, 2 of those steps are detect and run. And those are the 2 steps that directly use the Buildpacks. The other steps in the life cycle have to do with reusing cache and finally moving the layers that are marked as runtime layers into the final run image. So yeah, so these 2 are the 2 stages of the life cycle that have to do with Buildpacks.
Okay, that's great. Does anyone, we have a lot from Dr. Verm. I'm sensing that we're getting near the end. I'm hoping, because I don't have a lot of room left to write, but does anyone have any questions for Cora? And Dr. Verm has some more stuff to say. They're very tricky edge cases. Building from nothing creates more confidence that the result is repeatable. And Dr. Verm, are you talking about Dockerfiles, or do you have experience with Cloud Native Buildpacks, even though you can build only lower layers, you choose not to after having done it? Or is that just based on your experience with Dockerfiles? As the saying goes, there are two hard problems in CS: naming things, caching, and off by one error. Safi's, hi, Corey. Safi's just joined the stream. Interesting stuff. I think so too.
Hello.
El Nemesis Davina says thank you to us. I lost my. Oh, hi, Cora. Hi. So I thought, Zafi's, I thought you were telling us your own name, but you're saying hello to Cora.
Hi, Zafi.
That's great. I like your Little Big Planet avatar, Zafi's. So, what is there something? Oh, do you know what I want to go over? Is the benefits of Buildpacks too. So the benefits I wrote down when we were talking is that they're consistent, they're efficient, they're customizable, but also not if you don't want to. They're reliable, repeatable, and then they're managed. So they have opinions and they have security built in. But then if you have different opinions and different ideas about security and such, that's where the customizable piece comes in. But
I mean, I would say they're customizable in the sense that all these build packs are little modules, and you can also add a module of your own, or you could replace a module that's there, or you could write your own build pack. You could write all of your own build packs too, right? Like this is just saying, if we like Paketo, if we like Google, if we like Heroku, we can use their implementations, their opinions. But it's also just an API. So if you had fun, if you wanted to do all the stuff you did in Dockerfiles yourself for some reason, it's an API.
But yeah, if you have opinions. Dr. Vern says they're talking about CI, which I now know is continuous integration, and building the world, whether Dockerfiles or Buildpacks, both which use BuildKit under the hood. I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah, it's better to automate than to rely on the process starting from a repo. Like who's kicking off the process, right? If you were using a cluster to be autonomous, that's better. You will automatically rebuild all your apps when they need to be rebuilt.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can do more reuse on local development environments. Zappies is asking, can we use a custom base image with Buildpacks? We didn't talk about the base is a OS, right? We didn't talk too much about
the base is Ubuntu. Bro, the base for Paketo is Ubuntu. I don't know what the base is for Google and Heroku. So my understanding, the last time that I was asked this question, so my knowledge may be a little bit out of date, but is that, so the open source so from a Paketo perspective, the open source is not doing anything special to like support the use case of swapping out your operating system, right? They are maintaining the Ubuntu images that they are maintaining and providing promises about. The commercial product that is the commercial product that is the counterpart of this cluster CI tool that we've been talking about, the platform KPack. So basically, the commercial version of all of this is KPack and Paketo, like the commercial version of that. I know that it was on their roadmap to support companies providing their own base image. I don't know if that's yet like GA'd feature or not GA'd feature, but it's in the commercial set that feature would be supported.
So right now, if you're trying to use purely OSS, you cannot use a custom base image, is what I'm hearing.
Not if you're using the OSS. Yeah, it's not supported by that's not what the OSS implementations are offering you. It's not one of the things that they're one of the use cases that they're building into how they do it.
Ubuntu or bust.
Ubuntu or bust for open source, for Paketo. Open source.
Excellent. Cora, this has been so fun. Oh, here we have another question. Also from Zafi's. If I have enterprise components like cert stores, proxies, etc., that could be baked into Buildpacks.
So how do they work with so I've never looked into this. And I know that there is a CA certificates Buildpack, as I mentioned, that is used with all images. I haven't really looked into the configuration. I'm looking now at the, I know that with that cert, you can enable or disable it, but I don't know much about like your own cert. So I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if either, I don't know if maybe Scott, that's something that you've seen. But I unfortunately can't give you a great answer to that question. But you can always add your own build pack, right? Like there's always the ability to create your own build pack and include it in the mix of build packs. So take all the ones that would, like, if you have a Java app, all the default ones that would be applied, and then add one of your own where you can do your own cert store proxy configuration. So that's always an option. How do KPack and Tanzu? So the commercial counterpart to KPack, which is KPack is the OSS tool that you install in a Kubernetes cluster that will autonomously like look at all your Git repos with where you've told that you have application code and build images and publish them to your registry. The commercial counterpart to that is called Tanzu Build Service. So they come, I guess they you know, generally the commercial counterpart to any of these open source tools, by and large, the difference is that the commercial counterpart will cater to use cases that are a little bit more specific to like large enterprise needs. And I think this superset of Tanzu build packs over and above Paketo, I think it includes like maybe some partner integrations. You know, this idea that like enterprises are more invested and interested in changing out the base operating system, for example. That kind of feature would be in a commercial product. The maybe like the way that there's something about, like, I think that the commercial side automated a little bit more about like setting up your builder within the product. Like with KPack, there's a couple of steps, and I think the commercial one shortens that process for you a little bit. So there's some features for enterprises basically in the commercial products. I don't know if that's a great answer. And then what do we have here? Dagger also builds on BuildKit, but makes it easier to swap out or combine things than BuildKit. It can also do a lot more than build container. So I think these are other sort of like backend systems but Dagger, I guess Dr. Verm, would Dagger just be executing a Dockerfile also? It just is a little bit some more features, but you're still relying on a Dockerfile? That would be my question there. And then Zappy says, I attended the Josh Long KPack learning session. It was great. Cool.
Wonderful. We all love Josh. Dr. Verm says Dagger uses Q. That's
no Docker files. Okay, yeah, I'll look into it. I don't know about it. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm unfamiliar. This has been so fun, Cora. I'm so happy to do my very first Enlightning episode with you. You're so knowledgeable. Oh,
this has been so much fun. I've learned so much. I feel like people in chat know so much. Thank you for the great questions and for filling in some of the details that, you know, that we didn't know, that I didn't know. I feel like there's QLang.
Yeah. Cool. So this is another difficult part of the stream for me, but we're gonna try to raid another channel. So we're just gonna, so our whole group will jump over. So
I have to say, for me, like, this is super interesting because like I didn't start this knowing like what this was gonna look like on the light board. You know, I wouldn't have like predicted.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, you didn't.
Like I wouldn't have predicted that we would like focus on the detect and run stage. Like, you know, it wasn't like we started this knowing where we were going to end up or how we were going to approach the topic. So I think this is cool.
Yeah, it's part of the adventure of it, right?
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I get a little attached to them. It makes me like a little bit sad to erase each one. But this has been amazing. And I decided I don't want to. I'm just going to say goodbye. I'll take on learning to raid other channels another day,
Okay. Well,
but I
also
think I'm just going to
congrats,
sign off.
Whitney. I think congrats on like you're kicking off an amazing channel. You put so much work there. Like this is so well thought out. I know you put a lot of effort into it, and it's like off to this amazing start. I can imagine that like it's just going to get better and better, and it's amazing already. And so really kudos to you for all the
Thank you.
creativity and all the effort.
That
You're doing, yeah, it's really great.
that
Thank
means the
you.
world. I feel wildly vulnerable, but that's okay. That means I'm doing it right, I think. Yeah. So, but the encouragement is definitely welcome, and I appreciate that very much. All right, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. Screenshot the board and share, please. Okay, I'll do that. I'm Wiggity Whitney on Twitter, so I'll post a photo of the board for y'all, and I'll tag Cora too. So great. I'll see y'all
Awesome.
later. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.